Okay, there we go. Now we're both on. All right, good, good. So
There you
today
are.
we're going to talk. Yeah. Okay, I was like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. All right, good. Good to see you. All right, today we're going to talk about these cases that actually help change America. What is that? No. Anyway, there's about 8 or 10 of them, and they go all the way back to 1966. Okay, and the reason why I think it's important is because it helps people understand, number one, what the Supreme Court does, and number two, how it benefited and how it hurt. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today. I don't know what that. Anyway, all right. So the first one we're going to start with is of course, our fair use disclaimer. I need to get that done right this minute so we can because we are going to show some videos. Here we go. All right. Here we go. Let's go. Let's go. Well, everything's working slow as the turtle today. Of course it is. Can't win for losing over here. Okay, here we go. Let's pull this back up. Here we go. Oh, it's right here. All right, let's go on back down here, and this needs to go away right there. Go away. All right, all right. Oh my God, I'm fixing to scream. I'm fixing to shut the whole thing down and scream. That's what I'm fixing to do. Okay, let's go back to our fair use disclosure. Oh my God, what is that noise? I can hear everything, a TV, I can hear all kinds of things.
No, everything is shut down. It's perfectly silent.
I wonder what it is.
Yeah, my TV's on mute, like the window's shut. Everything is, unless it's these new headphones that I got, I could use my old headphones.
They are picking up everything outside. Those are incredible. Anyway, let me just get to our fair use disclosure so we can get on with this.
Let me take these out and put my other ones in.
Okay.
And see if,
all right.
If that is anything. Okay.
All right. I was like, Jesus. All right. Well, I'll just come back. We'll just come back to that because, all right, here it is. This live stream contains excerpts of publicly available news reports, courtroom footage, and other media for purposes of commentary, criticism, education, and news reporting. All materials are used under the fair use provisions of Section 107 of the Copyright Act. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is the 10 criminal cases that didn't just make headlines. It actually changed the way the police investigate crimes, how prosecutors track cases, and the constitutional rights of every American. And our Constitution is very important. Our constitutional rights are very important, and they're something that we made decisions. We hold them dearly because in other countries they do not have their own. They don't have rights like we do. So that's what's great about one thing that's great about America. I can't help it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about this. Now, some of these decisions affected the death penalty law. Others changed police interrogations, DNA evidence, media coverage, and whether you follow true crime or not, these cases likely affect your everyday life, and you don't even realize it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Miranda versus Arizona. Now, we've talked about this one before. Are you there? All right, there you go. All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so we've talked about this one a little bit before, but it's an important case because it actually, hang on a minute, stop. All right, it actually, let me pull this up right here. We're going to show a short little video about the Miranda versus Arizona and where this came from. And this one goes all the way back to 1966. Now, this is going to be from Mr. Beast, I believe is his name, on YouTube. So credit Mr. Beast. All right, hang on just a second, guys. We'll share our screen. Okay, now let me go share my screen so you can all see what I see. And we'll talk about this one first. Here we go. Where do they come from? Why are they important? Because they are important. Yes, it is. It's Mr. Beat, not Mr. Beast. Hello. I gotta spell the name right. Here we go. Mr. Beat. All right. Mr. Beat. Here we go. All right. We're gonna share our screen. Here we go. Let's put that over there. Thank you for sharing your work. And here we go, guys. Let me make it bigger and we'll get it going. All right.
Phoenix, Arizona, March 13th, 1963. Police arrest Ernesto Miranda, a suspect linked to the kidnapping and rape of an 18-year-old woman 10 days earlier. In a police lineup, the victim identified Miranda as the attacker. For 2 hours, officers agreed.
Yeah, this, and you know what? This kind of goes back to the one case we listened to the other day when it talked about how they talked to him over and over and over. Well, Aton Pace, the same with Aton Pace is the suspect or the perpetrator. They did this to him as well, which was inappropriate, and so that is why he got a retrial. Okay, here we go.
Aggressively interrogated Miranda about the attack. The officers did not tell Miranda that he did not have to answer the questions, nor did they allow him to call a lawyer. I guess Miranda didn't pay attention when his teacher taught him about the Bill of Rights in government class. Anyway, the officers broke Miranda down, and he confessed to the crime, even signing a statement that described the details of the attack. When this confession was later used in court, of course Miranda was found guilty, even though his...
Okay, for fair use, we always have to stop and talk about something for a minute. But actually, when you talk about this Miranda warnings or people signing false oh geez, I lost my train of thought. So sorry. When they sign the statement, it's not even true, but they just sign it because they're listening to what the police officer says and they just want to hurry up and get out of there. And most people don't realize once they've signed that statement, well, then they're going to be booked into jail, have to get a bond, and then they're going to stand trial for whatever it is that they did, or that they signed their name to. False
confession.
Yes, false confessions. All right. I'm sorry. Listen, I'm just not 100% today. Because this is important to me, and whether anybody else cares or not, I do.
His lawyer argued that the police pressured him to confess. Miranda was sentenced up to 30 years in prison. He appealed to the Arizona Supreme Court based on the 5th and 6th Amendments. You know, the part of the 5th Amendment that says you cannot be forced to testify against yourself, aka the right to remain silent, and the part of the 6th Amendment that says you have a right to an attorney. But the Arizona Supreme Court agreed with the lower court. Welp. Miranda appealed again, and the Supreme Court reviewed the case in June 1966. And this was a tough one. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that Miranda's confession could not be used as evidence because the officer...
Now, you have to remember, he's arrested in 1963, so it takes 3 years for him to get somebody to listen to him about his false statement. 3 years. Let's keep going. It's a long time.
Officers had denied his 5th and 6th Amendment rights. Chief Justice Earl Warren gave the opinion of the court. Warren brought up that the police done messed up by misleading Miranda and not making it clear to him his rights. Warren said, quote, "The person in custody must, prior to interrogation, be clearly informed that he has the right to remain silent and that anything he says will be used against him in court. He must be clearly informed that he has the right to consult with a lawyer and to have the lawyer with him during interrogation, and that if he is indigent, a lawyer will be appointed to represent him." That kind of sounds familiar. The justices on the court who disagreed with the majority generally argued that the Constitution didn't say anything about making a suspect aware about his or her rights. They also...
Now, isn't that amazing that our actual Constitution does not say anything about that? But everybody has rights. And it is testifying against yourself when you sign these statements, and they're not even true, right? It's just such a it's just a huge... I'm sorry. Let me just play this right now. Thank you. Hang on.
Argued this gave too much power to suspects and would make police interrogation work much more difficult. They were afraid it might be more difficult to convict criminals. After the decision, police across the country had to inform suspects of their rights after they arrested them. They became known as the Miranda rights, or Miranda warnings.
You're under arrest, sir.
All right. So that is where the Miranda warnings came from, and this is why today that everybody has to be read their Miranda rights. You have to understand your Miranda rights before you sign any statement or talk to the police officers, interviewed by the police officers, etc. That's why I want to, that is one of the first things that happened that changed the way America looks at law enforcement, and criminal or crime cases. So the second one we're going to talk about is from 1963, and this is Gideon versus Wainwright. And this is where it starts. If you can't afford a lawyer, the state must provide one for you. Now, it matters because Clarence Gideon wrote his appeal from a prison cell on a piece of notebook paper. Now, he's not the only one that's done that, because we've seen other criminals write their own appeals on a piece of paper and, file it themselves. We've seen that happen a lot. But let me go pull this up over here. No, not that one. Let me go back over here. Let's go. We're going to get rid of that one, and we're going to look at the other one I want to look at, and that is the case of Gideon versus Wainwright. Now, I know there's little videos on all of this, so hang on. Here we go. Oh, Jack is snoring. And here's another one, and this is going to be from Mr. Beat as well. And I think he's a teacher. I'm not sure, but Gideon versus Wainwright. Let's see. Is this also from him? Then there's something called the Bill of Rights Institute. So I think maybe we'll use that one instead. So hold on just a second. So it's just a little short video. Now let me share my screen so you can see what I see. And this is going to be credit to the Bill of Rights Institute. Just a little learning. That's all we're doing today. Here we go. Oops, it wants me to correct it. There we go. All right, here we go. Share that. Share this. And let's get this going over here. Oh, I got it. Yeah, there it is. All right. Make this bigger. Okay, let's go. All right, here we go.
1963, the Supreme Court declared that states are required to provide free legal counsel for any indigent defendant charged with a serious crime.
What was the nature of the case that dramatically altered our legal system? And on what basis was it decided? This is the case of Gideon versus Wainwright.
On June 3rd, 1961, the Pool Room Bar in Panama City, Florida was robbed of a small amount of money and alcohol. Resident Henry Cook came forward and claimed to witness 51-year-old electrician Clarence Earl Gideon leave the bar with stolen items. Gideon, who had prior convictions for robbery, burglary, and larceny, was soon arrested and charged with both breaking and entering and petty larceny.
Unable to afford legal counsel, Gideon requested that the state provide him with an attorney, but was denied. Now representing himself in court, Gideon was convicted of both crimes and given a maximum sentence of 5 years.
Now incarcerated by...
What do they always say? The fool who represents himself in court is the fool, or something like that. There's a little saying that goes with that. I can't remember the whole thing.
Has a client who's a fool or something like that.
Right. Okay. So, we're going to go back to 1963, and we know the background. I'm going to watch a little bit of this, and then I'm going to read something that I found about this that I thought was pretty darn interesting. So here we go.
What he believed to be an unfair trial. How would Gideon respond?
Determined to fight back and earn his freedom, Gideon went to the prison library and studied the legal system. In January 1962, Gideon wrote a 5-page letter to the United States Supreme Court pleading for them to hear his case. And to Gideon's relief, they accepted. Gideon versus Wainwright was underway.
In Gideon's corner was Supreme Court assigned attorney Abe Fortas. Fortas argued that there could not be a fair trial in a criminal case without counsel, and that citizens uneducated in legal matters cannot properly defend themselves in a court of law.
Fortas's main argument came under the Sixth Amendment's guarantee to the right of counsel in a criminal case, which applies to states via the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause.
Now, if you remember, every time we read an appeal, what's always in there? Oh, they violated my constitutional rights, the 14th Amendment, the 6th Amendment. Remember, it's in every single one of them. It's like they all read the same book and used the same form to file their appeals. Anyway, here we go.
Attorney Bruce Jacob represented the state of Florida. His main argument against Gideon was that the state of Florida was only required by law to provide free legal counsel for those accused of capital offenses.
The fate of Gideon and other inmates nationwide was hanging on the Supreme Court's decision. Did the state of Florida meet the constitutional requirements of a fair trial when they denied Gideon legal counsel?
Delivered by Justice Hugo Black, the ruling was in Gideon's favor by the unanimous vote of 9-0.
thus overturning the 1942 case Betts versus Brady. States were now required to provide free legal counsel for indigent defendants charged with any serious crime, not just capital offenses.
Despite
All right, now hang on a second, guys. Now, a unanimous decision, that hardly ever happens in the Supreme Court because they usually just don't all agree, right? So when they had a unanimous decision about this, and it's therefore all states must provide attorneys to criminal defendants who cannot afford one. This decision overturned this case called Betts versus Brady, which had allowed states more discretion in appointing counsel. Now let's talk about why it matters. This ruling dramatically expanded constitutional protections for defendants and led the growth of public defender systems across the United States. Now, it reinforced the principle that access to justice should not depend on one person's financial resources and became one of the most influential decisions of the Warren Court era. This is a lasting legacy, just like Miranda versus Arizona is a lasting legacy in law. It remains the cornerstone of American criminal law. Subsequent Supreme Court cases are built upon its reasoning to clarify when counsel must be provided and what constitutes effective legal representation. Now, you also remember in all of these appeals, they all try to claim ineffective counsel because, when they lose, it's got to be the lawyer's fault. It can't be that they're criminals. It's got to be the lawyer's fault. So this case is frequently cited as a defining example of a court's role in expanding procedural fairness and protecting constitutional rights in the criminal justice system. Now, I'm going to take this one off because the next thing we're going to talk about, I'm sure y'all will all remember. Let me get this fixed over here. Okay, hang on. Now, the next one we're going to talk about, do you remember Furman? You know who Furman is?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The next one we're going to talk about is Furman versus Georgia. That was a big case, right? Let's get this pulled up.
He just died recently.
Let's see. Now, Carol Steiger. Now, this is from Harvard Law School, and I love to hear it from a lawyer point of view or for somebody who teaches law and their point of view. So let's go ahead and give this to Harvard Law School. We're going to give full credit to Harvard Law School, and then we'll come back and talk. This may not be a very long show. It's just I wanted to talk about some of these things that we hear about in all these cases, but we don't ever ask questions about where did that come from? How did it start? Those kind of things, Harvard Law School. Oops, I gotta spell it right. Hang on, backspace. I've got 3 things open. It's making it hard to see. All right, here we go. There we go. So now, let's talk about Georgia. Okay, Furman versus Georgia was a landmark Supreme Court, and it was decided on June 29th of 1972. That transformed capital punishment law in the United States. In a 5-4 ruling, the court held that existing death penalty systems were being applied in an arbitrary and inconsistent manner, just making their use unconstitutional under the 8th and the 14th Amendments. This decision effectively halted executions nationwide and forced the states to redesign their capital sentencing law. So let's go ahead and listen to Harvard Law School tell us about it. Here we go. Her name is Carol Steiger. Okay.
Which meant that in all of the places that it was then practiced.
We've got to share our screen. I need to share this. Oh, is that the right one? Oh, that is the right one. So sorry, guys. All right, here we go. I'm going to make it big so we can all see it. Okay, here we go. All right, Mrs. Steiger.
40 states and the federal government. It disappeared overnight. There's a story there because, as we all know, the death penalty is still quite alive and well here in the United States. So Furman was not the end of that story, but it was certainly a major landmark along the way.
Let me move this up some so we can get back to her talking. I don't want to read right there. Okay,
Since the inception of the country, at the time of the founding of the country, every one of the 13 colonies had the death penalty. In most criminal cases, as most people know from watching like Law and Order on TV, judges do the sentencing. So the jury will decide whether someone is guilty or not guilty. And if they're found guilty, then the judge, generally in most state systems and in the federal system, imposes the punishment. One main exception to that is capital punishment. It has been a long tradition in the United States that juries tend to be the ones imposing the death penalty. And prior to Furman versus Georgia, juries were given complete discretion.
Actually, that is true now, but it wasn't always true, because remember, we've talked about states that were, if the jury said, oh, I'm going to give him life in prison, the judge can say, oh no, I want him to get the death penalty, and boom, they would get the death penalty. And I've always thought that was really unfair, you know. But let's talk about how far back the death penalty actually goes. I mean, this is look at the Salem witch trials. I mean, who was the judge on that? It was usually the preacher, like the preacher would be. He would serve as the chief magistrate of the court, and he would make the decisions. Now, this is as far back as 1692. Now, there were other magistrates and judges, but they did not make the decision of the death penalty. So that's kind of an interesting little thought, a little bit of information I found. Here we go.
As to whether someone should get the death penalty for a crime versus some lesser punishment.
In the event that you find the accused guilty, death sentence is mandatory in this case.
For most of American history, no one thought that the Constitution had anything to say about the death penalty. The death penalty appears to be mentioned in the Constitution because the due process clauses of both the Fifth and the 14th Amendment say you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, which seems to suggest that you could be deprived of life, liberty, or property if there is due process of law. In the 1960s, suddenly, there was a decision, not really a decision, a non-decision by the Supreme Court that started the whole challenge in motion. In 1963, Justice Arthur Goldberg wrote a dissent from denial of certiorari. So a denial of certiorari is a decision by the Supreme Court not to hear a case, but justices can dissent from the court's refusal to hear a case. And that's what Justice Arthur Goldberg did in a case called Rudolph versus Alabama.
You know what? I am so glad she just used that word, because I now know that I have pronounced it wrong the entire time. I did not go to Harvard Law School, so I did not know that. So we will have to remember certiorari. Okay? Certiorari. All right. Here we go.
You need 4 justices to grant cert. The court declined to grant cert, but 3 justices, Arthur Goldberg, joined by William Brennan and William O. Douglas, wrote a dissent from denial of cert, saying that they thought the court should decide this question. That really got the attention of the nation's premier civil rights group, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, known as the LDF. They knew, as everyone in the United States knew, that the death penalty was a racial issue. Rudolph versus Alabama, a black man sentenced to death for raping a white woman. This was the typical use of the death penalty, especially in cases of rape.
You know, while ago I was talking about there was a time when the states could override the jury, right? That was in Alabama, Florida, and Delaware. Those were the 3 states that would allow the judges to overrule the jury. This practice finally stopped in 2017, and I think that was it should have never been allowed, because why would you have a jury if you're going to let a judge come back and say, no, I don't think that's good enough, and I'm just going to give them the death penalty? To me, that always seems so unfair. Because we have the right to a trial by jury of your peers. If your jury says you deserve the death penalty, then you get the death penalty, period. All right, here we go.
So the LDF started a nationwide campaign, a litigation campaign across the country to challenge the death penalty constitutionally.
Okay, let's get her to talking.
This strategy was tremendously successful. The death penalty was in decline already in the 1960s in the United States, as it was in Europe, but the LDF's litigation campaign brought it to a complete halt. So from 1967 to 1972, in the 5 years prior to the decision in Furman versus Georgia, there were no executions in the United States. The LDF was raising every possible constitutional issue they could think of, and I'm not going to list them all. There were a lot. And the Supreme Court started granting cert on them. And it looked, and this is the exciting part of the story, it looked in 1971 like the LDF lost because the Supreme Court granted cert and decided a case called McGautha versus California, which decided exactly the same kind of challenge that was litigated in Furman, but under the Due Process Clause.
There's just a couple more minutes of this, but I think
So that was the
I think it's interesting to talk about because, especially if you are going to do true crime and you're going to watch these trials, you're going to talk about these trials, you need to know a little bit about some of the law, where it came from. So that is why I wanted to kind of talk about this today and talk about these important cases. I mean, because really it affects everybody. The laws changed for the better in some cases. Here we go.
The same claim that the lawyers had brought in Furman under the Eighth Amendment. But since the court had just rejected that claim under the Due Process Clause, most people thought that Furman didn't have a chance. Of course, they turned out to be wrong about that. Two of the justices who had been in the majority in McGautha rejecting that claim changed their minds, and the following year voted in favor of that same claim about lack of standards guiding capital sentencing juries in Furman itself. Stewart and White, along with Justices William Brennan, Thurgood Marshall, and William O. Douglas, made the 5 justices in the majority in Furman to declare the American death penalty unconstitutional in 1972.
That's amazing because it was declared unconstitutional in 1972. But guess when it started back up again? 1976. So for 4 years, it was unconstitutional. Then what happened? See that? What happened there? Here we go. All right, that is the end of that. All right, so we're going to stop that one. All right. Okay, make this smaller. So it's kind of fascinating to me how you can go from 1972, it's unconstitutional, and then all of a sudden back in 1976, they start again. Why? Why did the death penalty become active again in 1976? Let's just take a little quick look about why this happened. All right, hang on a second. There we go. Oh, Lord. Because Gregg versus Georgia. Now, that is another case that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. In Gregg versus Georgia, that is when it changed, and it was all of a sudden, it was okay. It wasn't not unconstitutional anymore. Here we go. Let's keep going. But the next case we're going to talk about, because we're doing these in the date orders. Well, not the date orders, but anyway, Roe versus Wade. Now, let's talk about Roe versus Wade. That has now been reversed, and I don't know how I feel about that. How do you feel about that, Sprinkle? Hello?
Yeah, I know. I agree. I'm kind of on the fence with that. I don't really agree with
5
that.
things that will happen when Roe v. Wade is over.
Stop. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm kind of on the side of I don't really agree with reversing it.
Right. I mean, I'm going down here. I'll go down to where I was. Whoops, hang on a second. Oh, Lord, let me get back over here. Let's see. Okay. Roe versus Wade. Remember when there was this discussion, and I believe that there was a child. Now, hang on, because I got to remember the whole story. You might remember this better than I did, because there was a story about a child that survived I'm not going to say the word, and
Assault.
hang on a second. What happened? The change in Roe versus Wade. I mean, the reason why this happened is something that I thought was so strange. It changed the laws of, I'm going to say the A word. And later, there was another one about Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization. So the Supreme Court says that the U.S. Constitution protects women's rights to the word A before fetal viability, and that's subject to certain limits. Now, states could regulate this, but they could not impose a total ban before viability. But back in 1972, Planned Parenthood versus Casey was another case about this, and the court reaffirmed the core holding of Roe, but replaced the trimester framework with an undue burden standard for evaluating the A word restrictions. Then it comes along back into 2022 when we go to Dobbs versus Jackson. Now, the Supreme Court overruled both Roe and Casey in 2022. The court held that the U.S. Constitution does not confer a federal constitutional right to the A word. Authority to regulate the A word was returned to the individual states and their elected representatives. Now, this is where it becomes a problem. Because why is it okay in Florida, but it's not okay in Texas? Why is it okay I'm just saying hypothetically, because I'm not sure which states it is okay in and which states it's not okay in, because it's just not something I would really keep up with, right? I just think that I know that the states run their own laws for the most part, but everything really is federal. When you stop and look at everything, if the state, even in a sentence, when people file appeals, if they don't like what happens in the state courts, what do? They go all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So if you are doing that for, in your appeals, then why is it not back? I don't know. There's just a lot of controversy about this, and I don't know how I really feel about it, actually, because I think that you've taken away the rights of women on one hand, but then on the other hand, you've protected unborn children. That is where, I don't know how to balance that in my mind, because I
Well,
just don't,
yeah,
so,
A is not really a black and white situation. There's a lot of
right.
gray area to it. There's a lot of gray
Absolutely
area to it.
is.
It shouldn't be used as birth control.
Oh,
That's
I
one thing.
agree.
It
Yeah,
shouldn't be used as a form of birth control, and unfortunately, it is used as a form of birth control for a lot of people. There's so many different, some people, when they say the time, when it's okay, when it's not okay, there's so much controversy about the whole thing. But the whole thing at the end of the day is women are still going to seek termination. So, do we want to do it to where women are going to be protected and not die while doing it? Or are we going to do it to where they have the option to do it and be safe?
right. Oh, it's such a controversy. It just is, and
Uh-huh.
a lot of states. I don't know if it's because they're going by religion running the state as to that discussion, or I don't know. Maybe this is not a good discussion to have because it's so controversial. So we'll
It
just
is
move on to
very
the next one.
controversial. Yeah.
We're going to talk about O.J. Simpson next. We all know who Orenthal James Simpson is. Now, as an American football star, an actor, and broadcaster, and his legacy, sadly, is what happened to his wife, right? Although he achieved extraordinary successes in sports, he's remembered as the defendant in the 1994-1995 murder trial involving the deaths of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ronald Goldman. Now, this murder trial was extremely, I found problems with it. I remember this trial, I remember it so much, but I found problems with it because when you looked at him trying on the gloves, which we've all seen so many times, and you look at how he was putting on the gloves, there was no way those gloves were going to go on his hands. Now, to this day, in my opinion, he did it. How do you feel about it?
Oh, I agree. I agree. In him, there's so much that has come out since about him not taking his arthritis medication, so therefore that's why his hands were
This week
swollen
on
up,
BuzzFeed Unsolved.
and he couldn't get the gloves on. There's so much controversy just with the gloves on its own. Again, we look at the DNA. How
Mm-hmm.
how was there blood found at his home? How was there blood
Exactly.
found in his car if he wasn't at the scene? It was either him or somebody at his home. But due to his history of domestic violence, the arrows point directly at him. I'm sorry, they do.
And this also kind of goes back to what happens if you're famous? What happens if you're famous and you end up in the court of law for doing something, being charged with a crime like that? What happens? In most
Well,
cases, go ahead.
and I think the result of his trial, I think, affected a lot of other cases as well. I think it really affected the way that other cases were reached and the verdicts on other cases, because that was a tumultuous time. What was it? It was him and the Menendez brothers at the same time. There was a couple other
Ooh.
cases going on about the same time that he was in court.
Yeah, I don't remember the year of the Menendez brothers. Let me see if we can pull that up real quick.
But there was a couple other trials that were going on right about the same time. And I think it influenced people in many, many different ways. And I think the fact that he was freed, I think it influenced decisions on other cases.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out the dates of this. Okay. It's telling me all about it, but it is not telling me the dates of the trial. Oh, okay. Became one of the most watched courtroom proceedings of the 1990s for the Menendez brothers. Hung jury, second trial, renewed attention. Even just a few. What was it last year or whenever they were talking about? Oh, they might get out. They might get out. They're going to change the sentence. No, I'm glad they did not get out, because I will always stand. I will always say, if the jury gave you a panel, if the jury gave you a decision, that is it. You should not be coming back a few years later just because something else changed and I get a new sentence now. Because in every other case, in a lot of different cases, they don't go back and make it retroactive to the time when somebody did the same act, right? So I don't think it should ever be changed. And I was a proponent of, no, do not change their sentence. Leave them right where they were, because I do not believe at all that his father did what he said he did. I just don't. I just
You
don't
don't
believe it.
even
Uh-uh.
even after the kid from Menudo came forward and said that it happened to him, that didn't
No, I
change you in
don't.
any way? No.
Nope. Because look, when people want attention, what do they do? Or when people want to get away with something, what do? They blame the victim.
Yeah.
They blame the victim. Gypsy Rose Blanchard blamed the victim. Menendez brothers. How many more victims are going to be blamed for what the perpetrators did? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's another very controversial case, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, I just don't. I'll never change my mind on that. So let's go ahead and talk about the O.J. Simpson and what made his trial change the way we look at uh, these criminal cases. What is that? Hang on a second. Anyway, so on June 12th, 1994, Nicole. Hang on. Amazon is here delivering a package and the dogs have to bark. I don't know why they opened my front gate. I have a big iron front gate, and it's there because I don't want people knocking on my door. Why do they open the gate? It's like they don't know the rules. Anyway, we'll get back to this case. So Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were found stabbed to death in Los Angeles, and Simpson was charged with both murders after becoming the focus of this investigation. Now, his attempt to surrender led to this widely televised low-speed white Ford Bronco chase, which was ridiculous and scripted because they needed him to look innocent. I really do believe that. And so then, one of the most memorable news events in America was this white Bronco and the helicopters follow them and all that. So attention seeking, right? So this is a criminal case. The trial lasted more than 8 months. Now let's talk about 8 months. That was unprecedented, and it received so much media attention that the prosecution argued that the physical and DNA evidence implicated Simpson, while the defense challenged the handling of the evidence, alleged misconduct by the police. And on October the 3rd, 1995, the jury found Simpson not guilty on both murder charges. And under the U.S. law, that verdict meant he was acquitted in this criminal case. That case and all the circus, because it was a big circus that went with it. I mean, I just have a lot of, let's watch a little of this BuzzFeed Unsolved Mystery, because here's the thing about it. Now it's considered an unsolved case, a cold case, because they never charged anybody else. There was no reason to charge anybody else. All the evidence pointed toward evidence. But because you have a jury, I believe, in my reasoning is you have a jury that's a football star. You know, he's, and I think that they just couldn't find him guilty because of who he was, what he had done. And, you know, I think that's what it is. I will always believe that. Here we go. Let me just play this for a minute. Sorry, guys. Ugh.
We discussed the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald L. Goldman, or as you may know it, the case of O.J. Simpson, who was Nicole's ex-husband, a Hall of Fame running back in the National Football League, and the case's top suspect.
Also, I was a little boy when this happened.
But you do know a fair amount.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone our age, he's just...
Yeah, I actually never even knew he played football. I just knew him as the guy who probably murdered somebody.
Yeah.
And his name was the Juice.
His name was the Juice.
There's a lot to unpack here, so let's just get into it.
Now, we're not going to be able to play the whole video because it is long, but I do want to hear them talk about it. And it's kind of amazing that these people weren't even born then, but they're talking about it. I mean, O.J. Simpson, he's been a big star, and his name will always be big. Okay, here we go.
Early morning of June 13th, 1994, at 12:10 a.m., the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald L. Goldman were found outside Nicole's Brentwood townhouse, stabbed to death. So right now we're on our way to Nicole Simpson's house.
Hang on a second, guys.
Is that it right over there?
That's it over there. I feel awful.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about this. No. Such a cheery evening here in Brentwood. Yeah.
Let me kind of speed this up because I don't really want to go look at the house. I just want to hear them talk about the actual case itself.
And others arrive at dinner at a restaurant called Mezzaluna. At 9:15 p.m., Nicole's sister calls Mezzaluna to say that her mother had left her glasses there. Ronald Goldman goes to pick up the glasses. At 9 to 9:30 p.m., Brian, Cato, Kalin, and O.J. Simpson go to McDonald's for dinner. I can't imagine McDonald's was pleased to hear that.
I can't imagine O.J. Simpson going to McDonald's for dinner. That's kind of crazy. Let's move along to the next part of the timeline here. Okay. Here we go.
At 9:48 to 9:50 p.m., Goldman leaves Mezzaluna with a white envelope containing Nicole's mother's glasses. At 10:15 p.m., Nicole Simpson's neighbor hears a dog bark and cry while he is watching TV. The prosecution would later cite these barks as the barks of Nicole's dog, who was theoretically crying out at the murder of its owner.
Okay, and I can understand that because even anybody who has a dog realizes or knows that when somebody comes in the house, the dog starts barking. And if the dog sees that there's a problem, they start barking even louder, and they become just moving all over the place, and they can't calm down, and they're upset. And I mean, if they can't get out the door, then they can't go get anybody to get the help. You have seen dogs that actually go get people to help other people. Dogs are pretty smart, but here we go.
Nicole.
So they're going by dog bark.
They're going by dog bark. In a lot of ways, this dog.
All right, let's go back over here.
5 p.m., Ellen Park, the limo driver, buzzes O.J.'s intercom several times, but there is no answer. Just before 11 p.m., the limo driver sees a shadowy figure, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, walking across the driveway towards the house. At about 11 p.m., the limo driver tries buzzing the intercom again, and this time, O.J. answers. O.J. tells the limo driver that he had overslept and had just gotten out of the shower. Doesn't look too good.
Doesn't look too good.
No, it doesn't look too good at all, does it? Quick thinking on his part, wasn't it? Now, hang on just a second, guys. I'm going to leave that right there, and I'm coming here. We need to talk about this for a second. So, I mean, in unrelated cases, now, Simpson was arrested again in 2007 after an armed confrontation over sports memorabilia in Las Vegas hotel room. So you got to think about this. He got away with actually murder, basically. So I guess he decided then he was above the law. So instead of somebody going to the law to help him recover the memorabilia that belonged to him that was supposedly stolen, he just goes and takes it upon himself to get it back by himself. And that was the worst mistake he could have made. He was convicted in 2008 of multiple offenses, including armed robbery and kidnapping, sentenced to prison, and served about 9 years, and was released in 2017. But the thing, okay, we'll go back over here and listen to this for a second.
Inside her townhouse, stabbed to death. Evidence found at the crime scene included a bloodstained glove left by the suspected killer, a knitted hat, and a bloody footprint. Detectives would arrive at O.J.'s house at 5 a.m. and would discover some key pieces of evidence, but we'll get into that later. Meanwhile, OJ's flight lands in Chicago. According to lead prosecutor Marsha Clark, Detective Ron Phillips called OJ to inform him that his ex-wife was dead. OJ's first response, quote, "Who killed her?" End quote.
Not good.
No, oh my God, let me get back home. How did this happen? Oh my God. None of that. Just who killed her. That does not sound good at all. That to me just sounds like he's trying to figure out if they knew he was there or not yet. That's what it seems like to me. But, who am I? I'm just a person. All right.
Not.
All right, hang on. We're going to move on to the next part because I don't want to. Let's go back to June 17th. All right. Now, there we go.
With 2 counts of murder, but he famously did not surrender to the police and was declared a fugitive. The resulting low-speed police chase of OJ on the freeways of Southern California.
That picture there will never come out of our minds. We will see it in our minds forever. Every time you think of O.J. Simpson, the first thing you think of is him in this white Bronco just going down the freeway. Who did he think he was going? What did he think he was going to do? I mean, who did he think he was going to surrender to? His attorney? I don't know. To me, this was just extremely weird. I remember being little and going, "What the hell are they doing?" Right?
His white Ford Bronco is a lasting memory for anybody familiar with the case.
Look how slow he
Remember that? I actually.
Oop, hang on. Shh. Oh, these dogs need to quit barking. Okay, hang on, guys. And we're going to get on down to the next part of this timeline because I don't want to show their whole video.
Into 2 sections: why OJ is the killer and why OJ isn't the killer. Let's start with why he could have done it.
No.
First off, let's start with a possible motive. OJ and Nicole Simpson had been going through a break, and around the time of the murders, Nicole and Ronald Goldman had reportedly grown increasingly close, leading some to speculate that they were perhaps more than friends. Though Goldman said that wasn't the case. That obviously is a clear motive right there.
Let's move on over to the next part of this timeline. And I'll say this. I do think that O.J. Simpson was extremely jealous. Now, they weren't together, but he damn sure didn't want somebody else to be with her either. So I believe that jealousy was part of the problem here, and I believe that that's part of what happened. I mean, you also have to remember, back in those times, not now, but in those times, it was nothing for these big football stars or these weightlifters to be using steroids. What happens when you're on steroids? We've also learned about that. They become very aggressive. Right? So I just think that did play into it, but we'll keep watching. Here we go.
Limo driver. Right now we're heading over to OJ's Rockingham estate, which was actually only 6 minutes away.
Going in here. It was only 6 minutes from his house to her house.
Further damning was the fact that this glove matched a glove found within OJ's estate behind the guest house near the area where OJ's friend Cato heard loud thumps at 10:40 p.m. Both gloves had blood on them that matched Nicole, Goldman, and OJ. OJ also had a cut on his finger the day after the murders when the police interviewed him.
Sorry.
The knitted hat found at the crime scene contained hairs that were proven to be OJ's by the FBI Hair and Fiber Laboratory. Also found at OJ's residence was Nicole's blood on a sock. Blood was also found in his driveway. The bloody shoe print found at the crime scene matched OJ's size, and the sole pattern matched another.
But he didn't do it because the gloves didn't fit. Now you think about all the pieces of evidence they had. But here's the thing. Why couldn't they take the inside of that glove and test for DNA? You ever thought about that, Sprinkle? Because I thought about that a lot. If you could test DNA back then, how come you didn't test the inside of the glove? That made no sense to me.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. I mean, there was all kinds of ways to prove that his hands were in those gloves besides, it doesn't fit. God almighty. Now, that was a smart move on his attorney's fault, on his attorney's part, right? Hey, and we'll never forget the statement. Well, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. I wonder how many times somebody's going to try that again. All right, let's go back over here. Jeez. But he didn't do it.
Another pair that OJ owned at the time. OJ had also purchased a knife, matching the type the coroner predicted the killer used. Though, the knife and the shoes were never found.
This is where a lot of people...
Now, we're going to keep going past it to the next part of this. Okay, here we go. There, spousal abuse. Oh, here we go.
And 9 police visits to the Simpson residence responding to domestic disturbance calls. In 1989, OJ was found guilty for spousal abuse and pled no contest to the charges.
Okay, but listen to how many
himself actually wrote a book in 2000.
Look, 9 different times that spousal assault. 9 times. Now today, 9 times, and you're going to go to jail. Why was he never put in jail over assaulting her 9 different times? That made no sense either. I mean, it's like what? He gets a pass because he's O.J. Simpson?
Exactly. That's exactly why he was never put in jail. Because of who he was.
Right.
But thank God that case changed the domestic violence laws.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and then a lot of problems with things that you have when you have. Sorry, guys, I'm just having a hard time concentrating. My attention deficit's all over the place right now. But one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of times, and I learned this whenever I actually went to this women's shelter locally and helped them. And, I would gather clothes for them, makeup, money, whatever I could to kind of help out. Because most of these women, when they would leave these men, they would always end up going back because they left with not a dime to their name and they only had the clothes on their back because they were kept that way by the men in their life. And so they felt like, and they're so beaten down, they felt like they couldn't do any better, they couldn't do any different. And most of the time, these women would end up dead before anybody did anything about it because they would go back and say, oh, I don't want to press charges. Now, these days, you can't just say, I don't want to press charges because the state can pick them up. Right. That's right.
Somebody goes to jail.
Right. I think that's the best thing that ever happened is when they stopped.
Oh, yeah.
Women say, "Oh, I don't want to press charges," because
I think it saved a lot of people, a lot of women's lives. I mean, I'm sure it saved men's lives too, because of course men are abused. But I think it did save a lot of people's lives, a lot of women's lives, changing that law.
Because here's the thing about women and men: men think with their head, right? Women think with their heart. That's just the way we are, because we love, right? Men think about everything. They love their wife, their children, etc., but that's not their main thought all day long. But for a woman, what's our main thought all day long? My children, my family, that's what I think about. And my little YouTube channel and how I'm going to make it grow, because I don't know what's wrong with it, but definitely something's wrong with it. But we'll talk about that another time. So let's go back and watch this now. Here we go. Let me get over here to the next part. Okay, here we go.
Way possible. For those that are new to this case, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty in court. Despite the DNA evidence found at the crime scene, the defense team called to the attention of the jury technical mistakes made by the forensic team, which created some doubt over the evidence. Evidence was not packaged correctly and even left in a van to overheat. This ultimately led to them suggesting that the crime scene may have been contaminated. Grasping at straws.
Well, I don't know if they're grasping at straws or not, because it could have been contaminated if it's left in a hot car. I mean, does that change any part of the DNA? I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Does it? But even we have a lot of cases today that actually have the crime scenes contaminated. I mean, some of these missing children, the crime scenes are contaminated because it was not treated like a crime scene when it first happened. They treated it like a runaway child, which is the worst mistake you can do. And I know children run away. I know they do. But the thing is, anytime you have a child that has ran away, I think it should be treated as a crime scene first. Now, if you find them and they actually ran away, charge them as a runaway. Take care of it that way.
You can't go back. If you do it the other way, if you treat it as not a crime scene, you can't go back. If you treat it as a crime scene, then okay, it's all done. You have all the evidence you need. You have everything. Nothing's contaminated. Look at John Bonet. Perfect example. Perfect example. You can't go back.
I mean, so there's a lot of unsolved cases that if they would have just maybe, and I'm not saying, oh yeah, that would have changed it, but just maybe if that's the way they looked at it, would be different today. I think Summer is one of those, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
5 years. Look, I'll tell you what's another good example of that, and that is Monkey Michael Bond. Finally, 5 years down the road, somebody is being held responsible. There's a lot of mistakes that happened then, and I can't wait for that case to go to trial. I do have the 532-page document that was just released on that case about from the hearings that they've been having. And I would love to sit down and read them with somebody, go over them with somebody and let's just talk about that case. Now, I don't like talking about missing children, and I don't want to be considered a tragedy pimp and all that stuff. But I think in Monkey Michael Bond's case, a lot of things could have made a difference had it been handled differently when it first happened. There's going to be some lessons learned from his case. But here we go. Let's keep watching this.
No, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a forensic artist.
I know.
There we go. Next thing
I
happens.
don't know how glove freezing works, frankly.
I'm not a glove freeze artist.
No.
Many believe that race played a factor in OJ's acquittal due to the events that surrounded the trial. In 1992, race riots occurred due to the LAPD's senseless and horrific beating of a black man named Rodney King, a beating for which the assaulting officers were acquitted of all charges. The defense strategically used law enforcement racism as a reason for...
Let's talk about that for just a second, right? Rodney King. That should have never happened. Why were they not charged? I mean, well, they were charged, but why were they not? That case, oh boy, that's another, actually Rodney King would be another whole show, actually. There's so much about that was so wrong on every level. And I do believe that is also what caused caused O.J. Simpson to get away with it. I agree with them right here. I absolutely agree with them on that part of it. Race did have something to do with it. Here we go.
OJ's charges. They showed a video of Simpson handcuffed as soon as he returned from Chicago, demonstrating the rush in judgment by the police. Perhaps one of their biggest arguments was centered around Detective Mark Furman. During the trial, the defense played for the jury a tape of audio in which Detective Furman was recorded using racial slurs over 40 times in one recorded sitting. This is noteworthy because Detective Furman was the first man to step inside OJ's Brentwood, Rockingham estate after the murders occurred, a feat he accomplished by jumping over the wall of OJ's.
Okay. That he entered illegally. He jumped over the wall. He didn't have a search warrant. He didn't have any of the required documents. That also helped mess up this case. And the fact that he cannot use proper English and use racial slurs. See, so many things happened here that I hope open the eyes for other cases and other people. Here we go.
State. This is a critical detail because according to Detective Furman's own testimony, it was during this time after he jumped the wall that he alone discovered the notorious matching bloody glove behind OJ's guest house. With this information.
So let me ask you this. Did he plant it there or was it already there? Which one was it? That's the question we're never going to know. He could have planted it there because he wanted O.J. Simpson to go to prison, because he wanted to blame it on the husband. Could have. We don't know the truth, and we're never going to know the truth on that either. That's another shocking part to this case.
The defense was able to suggest that Detective Furman planted the glove, and perhaps all other evidence found at OJ's estate, effectively tainting the evidence, regardless of whether or not it was true. Christopher Darden, a deputy district attorney assigned to the OJ case, summarized it in this quote, "It will do one thing. It will upset the black jurors. It will say, whose side are you on? The man or the brothers?" End quote. The jury.
Listen to that statement right there. That statement right there was setting up some kind of racism problem and within the court system, right there. And he was the deputy district attorney. Jeez. What else could we do to mess this case up? Think about it.
Was made up of 8 black people, 1 Hispanic person, 1 white person, and 2 people of mixed race. All these things considered, the jury reached the verdict of not guilty after less than 4 hours of deliberation. However, it's worth mentioning that OJ lost the eventual civil case for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman.
And that's another thing. I don't even think that they ever collected all the money that they were owed from that civil case, because by the time this was all said and done, O.J. Simpson seemed to not have any more money left, or he was hiding it. That's another part that we will never really know the truth about. What do you think, Sprinkle?
I think, well, I remember, and I'm not exactly sure about the number, but what's coming to my mind, excuse me, is after he died, I think the Goldmans got $38,000
out of $33.5 million.
That's what my brain is remembering seeing. Now, whether or not that's true and 100% accurate, I don't know, but that's what I remember.
And here's the thing. Do you think that $33.5 million in damages to those families was excessive? Do you think it was?
Can you put a price on someone's life?
No. Hey, Cinderella.
Trauma?
See you, girl. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just saw Cinderella. We've been talking.
Hey, Cinderella.
Hey there. Yeah. Good to see you, girl. I'm always happy to see Cinderella. What do you think, Cinderella? Do you think that $33.5 million was an excessive amount of damages to the families of the victims from O.J. Simpson? We'll let her answer. I'm going to see what she has to say. You cannot put a price on a person's life. I know you can't. But 33.
Or their trauma. That's a lot. Right, that's trauma. A lot of money. That is a lot of money. Yeah. It is a lot of money, though.
No. Cinderella does not think it was excessive at all. Okay. Well, thank you for answering that because I've always wanted to know what other people thought about that amount of money. Now, let's go back over here and we're going to watch the rest of this a little bit longer on this one. Here we go.
With the jury awarding their families $33.5 million in punitive damages.
This episode is bumming me out.
Hang on. We're going to go past that because I just want to hear. Yeah, there we go.
Kill her if she got in the way. However, it's possible that Rogers was serving a 6-week jail sentence at the time of the murders and thus lied about his involvement.
I feel like people.
Okay, we're going to just listen to what's the facts here, not just, okay. Hang on. Let's go back over here and let's see. There we go.
In a book, and the highlights are as follows. At the time of Nicole and Goldman's murders, Jason was on probation after having attacked his former boss with a knife. According to Deer, Jason had also attacked a former girlfriend named Jennifer Green. Deer also spoke to another former girlfriend of Jason's, named Dee Dee, who claimed Jason almost broke her back after throwing her into a bathtub, and perhaps even more suspiciously, cut off her hair with a knife, giving Jason 2 reported assaults involving a knife. Deer also reportedly obtained medical records of Jason's, illegally some might add, by dressing up and impersonating a doctor at Cedars-Sinai Hospital for 2 weeks where Jason had been a patient.
I don't like this guy.
He tricked.
Oh, wow. Check that out. Now, let's figure out. I'm not sure who Jason Simpson is, so I need to look that up real quick because I've not heard about him before. So I'm learning something new myself today. Who is Jason Simpson? Okay, Bobby, stop. A little dog scratching my leg. Okay. Is that someone related to, let's see. Jason Simpson is the adult son of the late O.J. Simpson and his first wife, Margaret Whitley. He is a professional chef who largely stayed out of the public eye until certain theories and personal accounts placed him in the media spotlight, which is when they're trying to blame him for the deaths, right? Oh, do I need to put you back on? Did you fall off?
Yeah, I kicked myself.
Yeah.
I kicked myself out. I was trying to unmute my mic. Isn't that his son?
It is his son. So this is their alternate suspect theory is to blame his son. Really? Your own son. So the allegations in the years following this 1994 Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman murders, some true crime investigators and documentaries proposed the theory that Jason Simpson was the actual perpetrator. The claims and proponents of this theory point to Jason's history of violent behavior, alleged struggles with mental health, and claimed inconsistencies in his alibi for the night of the murders. In the reality, law enforcement and the courts never officially charged or investigated Jason in connection with the crime. The defense and prosecution in the O.J. Simpson trial both centered on O.J. Simpson himself, and the theory remains highly speculative among the public. Now that's kind of interesting, really. Okay, let's see what else they have to say. I have not heard of him before, so, okay.
People in a hospital for 2 weeks.
People were murdered. This guy's playing dress up?
I know, but I'm just saying.
He's like, whoa, what if I do this? Whoa.
Well, he was doing it because he was
I'll put
chasing
on a funny wig.
in his mind.
All right, hang on. I'll go back over here. All right, let's get back to where they talk about it. All right, here we go.
He's got a mustache.
According to Deer, Jason had been diagnosed with intermittent rage disorder, and around the time of the murders, Jason stopped taking the prescribed antipsychotic drugs. This was also during the time when Jason reportedly told doctors he was, quote, going to rage. Jason's alibi was that he was working at a restaurant that night. Deer feels this is a flimsy alibi due to the fact that his time card is reportedly handwritten, which could suggest it was forged after the murders. This reportedly handwritten time card looks even more suspicious when you consider the fact that the electronic time clock at the restaurant was fully functional that night. Deer also reportedly has pictures of Jason wearing a knitted hat that bears resemblance to the one found at the scene of the crime. Pictures that only exist before the murders and not after. To cap this off, Deer suggests that O.J. was only present at the scene of the crime to protect his son, and that this would explain his bizarre behavior after the murders, such as the infamous Bronco chase. But, as mentioned before, many have discredited Deer's case as almost entirely circumstantial. Unrelated to this case, on September 16th, 2007, O.J. was connected to a robbery in Las Vegas.
You know what? I have a question. Did they try the gloves on Jason Simpson? Did they ever put these gloves on Jason Simpson? They might have fit his hands. He might have been in a rage, and he might have done it. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think that's kind of an interesting take on it, especially if he was upset because he did not like Nicole Brown Simpson. Maybe he didn't like her. I mean, his parents weren't together anymore. Children want their parents to be together. Just so many facts we don't know, and I wonder why this guy decided to put him into the case. Interesting. Here we go.
Nevada. In the 2008 trial that followed, O.J. was found guilty for 12 counts, including armed robbery and kidnapping, and was sentenced to 33 years in prison. According to CNN, the overall percentage of Americans who believe OJ did murder Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman has increased from 66% in 1994 to 83% in 2014.
Certainly, there are a lot of...
Yeah, and I can see why people would believe that. Let's see if there's anything else. I mean, because if he will kidnap somebody in a hotel with a gun to get his memorabilia back, what else will he do? Okay, let's see what they have to say.
Well, thanks, Ryan. This has been a blast.
So there you go. That is the end of that case. So O.J. Simpson and his case and how it changed the world of crime. Okay, I'm hoping that they learned a lot from that, because all the mistakes they made, and really, you could never really trust whether Furman planted that or not. I mean, I have a lot of questions now that I'm never going to know the answer to, because there's no chance to go back and relook at any of it. It's over. It's done. He's died. It's over. Now, his life remains one of the most discussed intersections of sports, celebrity, and race, policing, media, and the American legal system. His football achievements are historically significant, but public memory is dominated by the murder trial, which transformed television news and sparked enduring debates about criminal justice, forensic evidence, and race in the United States. That's what is important about that case. Now, the next case that we're going to talk about is Casey Anthony. Oh, Lord, this case has a lot of questions, lots of no answers. And this is where it starts out, that these people come out of prison and think they're going to be famous. Casey Anthony, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, they're all the same. So Casey Anthony, this American woman, she became the focus of one of the most widely publicized criminal cases in the United States after the 2008 disappearance and death of her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. The case attracted enormous media attention, and her 2011 acquittal on murder-related charges remains one of the most controversial jury verdicts in modern American justice. And it is. Because how many people, Cinderella, do you think Casey Anthony killed her daughter, or accidentally was responsible for her daughter dying? Let's see what Cinderella thinks. What do you think, Sprinkle?
Absolutely. I don't think it was intentional. I think she drugged that baby to keep her quiet, and I think that she gave her too much, and the baby never woke up, and she did it. That's what I think. That's the way I feel.
Cinderella believes that she did it as well. I believe that she did it as well, and I believe that she had a habit of silencing her daughter, silencing Kaylee, so she could just go do whatever she wanted to do. Because she knew she couldn't just leave her at home like that, because her mother would get upset. What are you doing? Why aren't you taking care of your daughter? Even though those parents loved that child and they would have done anything for her, they gave Casey a lot of grief if Casey wanted to go out and do things and not include her daughter. Yeah. Was there an autopsy on Kaylee? No. Remember, there was not.
Yes. Yes.
Was there?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Garibaldi, the famous coroner in Florida, Garibaldi. Garibaldi.
Okay. Tell me about that, because I don't remember that.
What's her name?
I don't know.
Yeah, Garibaldi. I can't think of her name. Dr. G. They called her Dr. G.
Right. Okay. Now
she did the autopsy.
Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about. We're going to use it's from 5 years ago, and it's from Bailey Saran. Should I use that one? Let me see if there's another one that we should use. Hang on. Well, come on, thing. I wish my damn. All right, we'll use that one. It's fine. So let me hook us up with this one. So credit to Bailey. I don't remember how to say her. Let me see what the last name is spelled like. I don't remember. Sarin. Okay. Sarin. Okay, so full credit to Bailey here for her work on this, and we're going to use this under fair use. We're not going to watch the whole video, but we're going to look at parts of the video, because she's going to talk about this particular case. Now, this is a short video.
Did you miss me?
It's 48 minutes. We're not going to go that long, but anyway, here we go. Let's get over here where she starts talking about Casey Anthony. Here we go. All right.
Good. I miss.
All right.
Be in a relationship. She didn't enjoy being single or just on her own, or maybe she just didn't know how to be without a partner, but she always had someone. Later on, when her parents would think back to Casey's high school age, they really had no idea who Casey hung out with, her friends, who she was dating. I mean,
Do y'all find it odd that the father of Kaylee was never announced? Even during that trial,
Yeah,
nobody ever said who the father of Kaylee was. I
yeah,
find
that
that
was very
extremely
odd.
odd. Yeah. I wonder why. I wonder why nobody would talk about that.
Nothing. They tried to be involved, but Casey made it impossible for them to be involved because she wouldn't tell them anything, right? Casey would go out with her friends, she would party all night, and she just went through what one would call a wild stage, the adolescent years. Casey was about to graduate high school, and her parents wanted her to celebrate. The light turned off, and her parents, they wanted to celebrate their daughter's graduation. So they made some cards and they invited like a bunch of people over to have a little party for Casey. But literally the day before her graduation, her parents were like, hey, what's going on with your graduation? Where is it at? What time is it at? They're just trying to find information so they can attend her graduation, right? So they call up the school because Casey wasn't giving them any straight answers. So they
Well.
call up the school and they're informed that Casey wasn't going to be able to graduate, that she was failing most of her classes. The parents,
Can you imagine that phone call? Because you think your child's gonna walk the stage, they're gonna graduate, now we can start working on colleges, and you find out she's failing everything, not gonna graduate, and she's never said a word. You love Bailey. I did, Cinderella. I had never seen her before. I'm glad you love Bailey. I'm glad I'm using her again. I hope she doesn't mind, but it is under fair use because I do want to see some of the facts about about Casey's Anthony's case. I don't really know because I did not know this part right here. This is something I'm learning along with you guys. So here we go.
her parents, they literally had no idea. They had no idea that this was going on. And she didn't tell them. And she let them plan this whole party and didn't say, okay, okay, all right. So instead of trying to finish high school, Casey ended up dropping out of high school. And soon after, she got a job working at Universal Studios in the Hard Rock Cafe.
Now think about this. Who else worked at Universal Studios? Stephen Stearns or Stephen Stearns. All right. Jen Soto, that group. Here we go. Yeah, all right.
Now, after work, she would come home and she would talk to her parents about her coworkers and how her work day was. But overall, she seemed really happy. She seemed to really enjoy her job. In January of 2005, that's when Casey met and fell in love with her boyfriend, Jesse Grund. Now, it just kind of seemed like things were just really good for Casey. She enjoyed her job. She had this new boo thing that she really liked. Things were just looking up. Later that year, again, still 2005, Casey's 19 years old and she becomes pregnant. So she finds out she's pregnant and she's telling her friend that she doesn't want to keep the baby, but she wants to maybe give it up for adoption so she can continue her lifestyle and not have to worry about a kid. But months went by, Casey.
Okay, so you can imagine what happened here because I'm sure the grandparents were like, "Oh hell no, you're not. You're not doing that. We will take that baby. We'll raise it ourselves." Or was it because she's such a sociopath that she decided she would keep the baby to use it against the parents? Which one was it? Because I do believe that Casey Anthony is a sociopath, to be honest with you. I do believe she is. So what do you think, Cinderella and Sprinkle Donut? What do y'all think? Kept the
I
baby
agree.
yeah.
I agree with you 100%.
What do you think, Cinderella? Did she keep the baby to manipulate her parents? I know how I would be if I had a grandchild. I don't have any grandchildren. I just have my two little dogs in here because, well, my older child, maybe someday, right? My younger child, he's in college, he's 18 years old, it'll be a long time. So anyway, just talking about that for a minute. But yeah, I just think that was everything she did was manipulate. Cinderella agrees with us. It was out of manipulation to abuse her parents with. All right, here we go.
Still living at home and she doesn't tell her parents what's going on. She's still carrying the baby. And it wasn't until she was 7 months pregnant that Casey finally told her parents that she was 7 months pregnant. Now, Casey's very petite. She's very
This
petite.
brings other questions.
Okay. Casey said that she was wearing baggy clothes, loose fitting clothes. She's a petite girl. So it was she wasn't showing too much, but I think at the 7 months mark, it was okay, she couldn't hide it anymore.
Let's talk about that for a second. How in the world are you hiding a baby at 7 months? I don't care how small you are. At 7 months, you got to use something protruding out. You can see. You can absolutely see somebody's pregnant at 7 months. Were they this brings back to her parents. Did they just ignore her? Did they not pay attention to her? Is this why she was able to get away with not going to school and all these other things that they just never noticed? I wonder about that. What do you think? What do y'all think about that? Do you think that they just ignore her? Maybe.
Yeah, well, I think she was a wild child. I don't think she was around that much.
No, but I know she has a brother, right? And how did that? Do you think they were just into what he was doing and not into what she was doing? I don't know.
I think Casey was just a wild child and just kind of did whatever she wanted to do, and they just didn't really
They just let her do it.
What do you think, Cinderella? You think that they just ignored her until now she's 7 months pregnant and they have to pay attention? We'll see what Cinderella has to say, because I can see, based on those two and what we saw during the trial and after the trial and everything, I can see them just ignoring her because she was a bunch of problems. They just didn't want to deal with it, right? I can see that. Would I do that? Hell no, no. You're not going to do all that with me. Mm-mm. Yeah, that's. I mean, but I know there's a lot of parents who do not pay attention to their children. I know it's out there, and it's so sad because you're setting your children up to fail if you do not pay attention to them and you do not make sure that they're going to school and learning how to become an adult. They thought that she was a straight-laced kid. Oh my God! How about that? Cinderella says they thought she was a straight-laced kid. Wow. Okay. So they thought they didn't have, not that they ignored her, they thought they did not have to worry about her. Okay, here we go.
Anymore, so she had to tell her parents. She tells them, and she was telling them, I'm thinking about placing the baby up for adoption. But her parents were like, heck no, you are not putting your kid up for adoption. They were just completely outraged that she would even think about doing this. They forbade her from giving the baby up. So August 9th, 2005, Casey Anthony gave birth to her little baby daughter, Kaylee Marie Anthony. Casey, she said that her boyfriend Jesse was Kaylee's father. She said this pretty early on, but who the baby's father was it was still a mystery. Nobody really knew who the father was. There were many theories out there as to who the father could be, but Cindy and George, they never pressed Casey to find out who the.
Okay, let me ask you a question over here. Now, they forbade her to give this baby up for adoption. So here's the thing. She could have given the baby up for adoption without she's an adult. She doesn't need them to approve her putting the baby up for adoption. But I can see her them telling her, well, if you put that baby up for adoption, we're throwing you out. We're not providing you a car. You're not living here. We're not giving you money. You're just on your own. I can see that happening. What do you think, Cinderella?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, I think so. I
think there was a lot of manipulation on both sides of that.
I think her mother is very manipulative. I think that her mother. Well, now remember what else happened in this trial. Remember Casey Anthony starting to holler that, oh, her dad F8 her. Remember? Or
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Remember that situation? Well, why is it when people get in trouble, they start blaming things on other people and bringing that kind of thing into it as the reason why they did what they did? They always do. I mean, it's like, and to me, that is very sociopathic behavior. I know that we're not doctors and that we really cannot diagnose anybody with anything. But based on all we know and the traits that they show and the things they do, they lead us to believe that that's exactly what they are. Anyway, just an interesting situation. Here we go.
The father was. Casey at one point told her mother that Kaylee's father was in a terrible car accident and died. It just seemed like you could never get a straight answer from her. Her stories flip-flop and change often. I don't think it really matters who the father was, but just the fact that she lied, I think a lot of people kind of I don't know what they were doing. I don't know. This girl's just, you can't trust anything out of her damn mouth. Now, for some reason, the family thought it was best to keep Casey's pregnancy a secret, which is totally fine. You don't have to tell.
Now think about this. The family they decided to keep the pregnancy a secret. Well, let's talk about the reason why. They would have been embarrassed for anybody to know that their daughter was having a child and she was not married. Okay, so that tells me a lot about those parents, that they were if you were not going to embarrass them, by God. All right, so that's another mental circus that's going on with her and the dynamics between her and her parents. I mean, that's a lot. Cinderella, what do you think? And Sprinkle Down, what do you think about the fact that they wanted to hide the fact that she was pregnant? God.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it was all about status for them.
Right, status for them. Yeah. I mean, we all know that accidents happen or things happen like that, but why are you hiding it? You're going to be a grandparent. If you have the opportunity to be the grandparent, wouldn't you want to be the grandparent? Yes. Am I going to be upset? Would I have been upset? Yes. But would I have thrown them out of the house? No. That's the worst thing you can do to a daughter like that. Yeah. See, Cinderella thinks so too. She thinks the parents took advantage of the fact that Haley was born and that her mom did the same thing. Okay. See, I didn't even know that, Cinderella. Okay, I get it. So apparently, Casey's mother got pregnant out of wedlock as well. Okay, that makes sense. Now we know what's going on there. All right, let's go. Here we go.
Anyone, but for some reason, they decided not to tell Casey's older brother, Lee, that she was pregnant and expecting a baby until a couple of days before she gave birth. And then when they finally did tell him, he was very upset. He was very angry with the family, and he decided not to even go to the hospital when she did give birth because he was just so mad. So Lee, her brother, he was also living at home. So why they didn't tell him, I don't know. And this whole thing just caused like a major rift in the family.
Think about that. How did Lee not notice it? Did he never look at his sister? Yeah, she was a pawn. Absolutely right, Cinderella. Now, I don't feel sorry for Casey Anthony. I do not at all. Right. And I know that she's one of the most hated mothers in America, just like Jen Soto and just like a few of these other mothers who claim to not know. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that anyway. How is Lee, who lives in the same house, not seeing this big belly on his sister? Is she sitting in her room all the time? Is she gone all the time? This is wild. To me, this is very wild. Wow.
Family. Like, why would you keep this major secret from me? She's my sister. They seemed somewhat close, her and her brother. I don't know the thought process behind that. Couldn't figure out why. Choices were made. So on New Year's Eve, Jesse, Casey's boyfriend and alleged baby's father, asked for her hand in marriage, saying that he wanted all of them, the whole family, to just be together and be a unit, be a family. Casey was excited. She loved him. But I think this is just an observation and an opinion. But I think deep down she knew that he wasn't the father, and she was probably feeling some sort of way. So Casey has her daughter. She's newly engaged. And around this time, Casey enlisted the help of a nanny named Zanny, or Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. But she called her Zanny. So she says, when Casey.
Okay, now, that's another question I've already had. I did not think that she was ever a real person. Yeah, they don't care what she's doing until they didn't like it. Oh, okay, I got it, Cinderella. Thank you. So I always thought that Zanny the nanny was just a Xanax. I did not realize it was a real person that actually. Okay, see, this is where I get a little bit confused about this case. Who is Zanny the nanny? I know she named somebody that was a real person that had never even met her before, right? Is that right, Sprinkle? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think it was just like assumed that Zanny the nanny was like made up, but she very well could have been a real person. I don't know.
Okay, all right. Okay. Well, here's what I'm going to do. Because we can't watch the whole thing, we've already been on an hour and 22 minutes. I'm going to move past some of this, and we're going to get over by the trial. I know she's going to talk about the trial. Here we go. Y'all hang on just a second. All right. Okay. All right, here we go. Remember this part?
Body. Now, I personally have never smelled a dead body before, which I think is probably, is a blessing. But based off of everything I've read and researched, it sounds like you can't mistake the smell of a dead body. It's a very distinct smell. Like, you can't confuse it with something else. So George ends up taking the car home, pissed. Him and his wife, Cindy, are pissed because, first of all, why is the car in the pound? They have to pay the fees to get the car out. Now George is like, dude, the car smells like a dead body. So he comes home. He tells Cindy, hey, come here. Come smell.
You know, he's a cop. He knows exactly what this is, right? So I 100% believe that baby had been in the back of that car. 100%. So horrible.
The car. So Cindy comes out. She smells the car. She agrees that it's a pretty intense, foul odor. They pop open the trunk and they see a trash bag. So Cindy said that they didn't open the trash bag. They just threw it away. Then she said that she used an entire bottle of Febreze on the inside of the car. They left all of the car doors open to help air it out. This is according to Cindy. So again, naturally, George and Cindy are just super pissed. Not even super pissed. They're furious. You know, why did she just ditch the car? Why didn't Casey say anything? Does she not have?
You know what? I have a question. If he's a police officer, I want y'all to think about this. She was a real person. Okay, here's Cinderella. She was a real person. I remember correctly. She had been a co-worker at Disney. Okay, thank you, Cinderella, because I could not remember if she was a real person. I just remember somebody that didn't she end up suing Kaylee?
Didn't she? Okay, didn't she never? Wasn't it that she never did work at Universal Studios, or she did, but for a short time?
Yeah, I think she did for a very short time. Okay,
I
think I do remember that she ended up actually trying to sue Casey because she put her name into the disappearance and, of this child. Okay, but let me ask y'all something. He is a police officer. He knows what this is. Then he does not He does not keep it as a crime scene. Instead, he starts covering it up right then. Yeah, for a short time, she actually, okay, Cinderella, thank you. She did actually work at Disney or Universal for a short time. So George is out there covering up what's happened to his grandbaby, or whatever's happened in this car, he's covering it up instead of letting it be a piece of the evidence. Mistake or on purpose? Which one?
That's a hard one. I would go with probably on purpose because they're going to do everything they can to protect her until they realize until they realize that baby's dead. I think once they found out that that baby was dead, everything changed for them.
But they had already messed up the evidence, and you could not go back and do anything about it. Yeah. Okay, Cinderella says it's on purpose as well, and I agree with that. So here's the next. Let's see what she says next about this.
A car. How is she getting around? Where's Kaylee? I mean, all these thoughts are going through their head, and Cindy just wanted answers. So Cindy tries to get a hold of Casey, but she's not having any luck. So her best bet is to go find her. Last she heard, she was at her new boyfriend's house. So Cindy goes down there to the boyfriend's apartment. Now, when Cindy gets to the boyfriend's apartment, she knocks on the door, right? Okay, so she goes inside. She's like, "Where's Casey?" And they take her inside to the living room. Cindy says that she looks around and she just notices a bunch of drug paraphernalia all around. And it was morning. So they're just sitting there getting high. And it wasn't even lunchtime yet. And Cindy's like, she walks in like, "What are you doing? Where's Kaylee? Where is she at? Why isn't she here?" And then Casey told her mom that Kaylee was with the nanny, Zanny. So Cindy's like, "Okay, I can't take this anymore. I can go pick her up. Where is she? I haven't seen her in months. Where is she?" Casey's just getting more and more defensive as her mom is there questioning her. And
here's the question I have though about this. Why don't you think that that Cindy never trusted what Kaylee told her? Never. She must have known right away something was extremely wrong because they had the car and she remembers the smell. She doesn't see the baby anywhere, and then she starts hollering about some nanny. Now, how's she paying for a nanny when she's not even working? See, that's so many red flags right there. I'm pretty sure Cindy right then was like, "Oh, hell no, something's extremely wrong." See, Cinderella agrees with that too. They had to know right then something was extremely wrong. And I remember that case, there was so much media about that case. Here we go.
Front of her boyfriend and her boyfriend's friends. Let me just do this liner really quick and I'll be right back because.
Okay, hang on. We'll just go past that.
Is. And Casey was calm. She seemed irritated and annoyed that her mom was doing this and making such a big deal out of it all. And she kept telling her mom that she didn't want to talk to police. She didn't want any of this. Now Cindy is pushing her and pushing her. Finally, Casey gives in and speaks to the 911 dispatcher, saying that she knows who has her daughter, but the phone number she had for the nanny was a number that was no longer in service. But earlier that day, the nanny let her speak to Kaylee, and Kaylee was okay. Casey told the dispatcher that Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez was the name of the nanny that had Kaylee. Casey said that she had spoke to the nanny on July 9th on the phone, and then again on July 15th when she allowed her to speak to Kaylee. Casey told her brother Lee.
I want y'all to think about this for a second. The point they didn't know she was, they did not know she'd been fired at that point, so they may have really thought that she had money to pay for this nanny. Okay, got it, Cinderella, thank you. See, I just don't know that much about this. I remember there's so many things that happened since this case, and it was huge too. But think about this for a minute. Now, I lost my train of thought for just a second, but they're all like running around and she's missing and they're trying to believe her and she's seeming calm and she's freaked. I mean, you have to know that this boyfriend, I think I remember now that the boyfriend's going, "What do you mean? You have a kid?" He didn't even know she had a kid. Is that correct? I believe that is correct what happened right there. And then that caused another big problem. I feel like so much time had passed that I mean, it didn't matter. The baby, she was never going to say where she left that baby. She will never do it. And let me tell you something, how quickly she lies tells you how big of a sociopath she really is. Boom, 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 just right out of the mouth without even thinking about it. Reminds me of Gypsy Rose Blanchard 100%. Here we go.
That she had been communicating with Zanny through MySpace and was getting instructions from Zanny on how to get Kaylee back. Casey said that Zanny told her she would get her daughter back on Kaylee's birthday. To Cindy, it's just like, this is the dumbest story I've ever heard. Like, why are you not more concerned about your daughter? So police finally arrive. And then when they arrive, they ask Casey to take them to the last place that she saw Zanny. So she takes them to the Shawgrass apartments and identify which apartment was Zanny's.
Let's go back over here. Let's go
right?
back
The
to
dog
here.
smells the body. They see like a stain. It doesn't smell like a body, but it's the size of a body. Also, the mom calling 911 being like, it smells like a body. All signs are pointing to there being a body inside the car, right? It's just so obvious. They take the carpet out of the trunk of the car and they tested it, and it confirmed to be decomposition of the body as well as very strong chloroform. Also, there was hair in the trunk of the car. So they did DNA testing on the hair through mitochondria. When they tested the hair, it came back saying that the hair was either Cindy, Casey, or Kaylee's hair. The hair was longer than Casey's and it was untreated, unlike Cindy's, meaning it had to be Kaylee's. The hair also had what was called a decomposition band, and this is a dark band that can appear on the hair when the body is decomposing. Investigators also seized the family computer in hopes to find any type of evidence. So when they're looking through the computer, that's when they find or discovered that someone had been using the computer to Google search, quote, how to make chloroform, end quote. All right, baby, case closed, right? One more.
You know what though? The thing is, and you think about, I don't know how in the world she was acquitted. The only reason that I can think that she was acquitted is because out of all these things that took place, there was nothing that proved she did anything to that baby. She can't tell you where she's at. She's not going to tell you what happened to her, and she's not going to tell you all the places that she's dropped her off, or or wherever she's left the bag. Because I don't think that Kaylee was in that spot the whole time. It was so close to their house. I think that she had been moved a couple of times. What do y'all think? Cinderella, what do you think? And Sprinkle Donut, what do you think?
Yeah, it was too close. It was too close.
Yeah, I think
just like Gannon's. He was moved from place to place.
Oh yeah, right. Now I forgot about. How can you forget about Gannon? Right, that case makes me so upset that she's going to get a new trial. Makes me so upset. Oh my God, I don't know. Some people think that she's going to get a different sentence, but I don't believe so. I believe she will end up with the same sentence, but it will just be, they will be more cautious about the jurors that they're selecting. That's what I think is going to happen in that trial, but we're talking about Casey Anthony here. Here we go.
Do they need?
Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. Where's Kaylee? I'm jumping the gun here, but all signs are pointing to Casey. I mean, it's so obvious.
It is.
So they ask Cindy, hey, on your computer, we found that someone was searching for chloroform.
We talked about that before. Let's move past, because we've got to get to our other cases we want to talk about. So here, let's see about
caught
this.
Writing 4 checks worth close to $650 without the person's permission. This time, Casey's parents post a $500,000 bond, and she's released again from county jail into their custody. I don't know why her parents liked her so much. She didn't seem like that great of a daughter, but they kept bailing her out. And
$500,000 bond for $650 worth of unauthorized use or stealing people's money. That seems so excessive, doesn't it? Wow, that's huge. Now I don't even remember that part. How about that? Okay.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Now what? On December 11th, 2008, less than a mile from the Anthony family home, a utility meter reader was out working, and he was about 20 feet off of the road. He saw what seemed to be a skull. He poked at it with a stick and then realized that it was indeed like a real skull, and he calls 911. The man who found the remains had tried to report these findings to police 3 different times. He found it a couple months.
You think about that. He tried to report it 3 different times and nobody went out there? Nobody? How does that even make sense? I know he did not put that body there. We all know he did not do anything. He just found it there. He has nothing to do with this case. But 3 different times, and he was ignored until the 3rd time. What kind of shitty police work is that? And that's right, I'm now cussing about it, because that is shitty police work. Damn.
Months prior, and when he had called about it, someone needs to check this out, he wasn't taken seriously and was told that someone was going out to the area to check it out, but nothing ever came from it. So that's when he went out there himself, like up close to it, and again called 911. So this time a team goes out there and they find the remains. They find the skull. They find they find a skull, and the skull had duct tape on it, and nearby was a bag which included the rest of the bones, and then a baby blanket with Winnie the Pooh and Piglet on it was in another laundry bag. They knew immediately it was the bones of a child. On December 19th, police, they came forward and announced that the DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to Kaylee Anthony. So the police, they get a warrant for the Anthony house, and they discover that Kaylee's room had been a Winnie the Pooh themed room, which would align with the blanket that they found with her body. In the house, they also discovered a twin bag to the white one that they found at the scene where Kaylee's remains were also found. It was a laundry bag, and it was sold only in pairs. And the Anthony household contained just one of the pair to the bag that was found.
Okay, so a laundry bag also as being part of the evidence because they're sold in pairs. There's only one of them. Now, see, that to me, I don't know. I don't know because a lot of people can buy those laundry bags, right? And I'm never saying that she's innocent. I'm not. But there's some of the facts and some of the pieces of evidence that really I don't know how they could actually prove belong to that Anthony house. But here we go. We'll keep watching.
At the scene. These two very specific items made it clear whoever killed Kaylee, whoever it was.
Let's keep going here. Because we can't watch the whole thing.
Because they were the grandparents, they were allowed to be there if they promised to show no emotion. Now, they were heavily scrutinized because they showed no emotion in court, but many people forgot that they had been asked not to show emotion, and if they did show emotion, they would be asked to leave. I'm losing my voice. Casey obviously completely lied throughout the investigation. There was no nanny, and there was no job at Universal Studios. So the question became, how do you live a lie like that? Casey said that when she was 8 years old, her dad began to molest her, and she learned to lie at a young age because of it. Now,
Gypsy Rose Blanchard also said that her mother taught her how to be a good liar and manipulator, right? And then we're going to go back to the Melendez brothers. Well, we had to take their lives because my mom, he did this to me, and my mom allowed it. You see, it's always going back to find a way to blame the victims or some other. It's never the sociopath's fault. Just remember that when you're dealing with that kind of people, nothing is ever their fault. It's always somebody else. They never take responsibility for anything they did. Here we go.
Took the stand and he said that he did not molest his daughter. Their proof, Casey didn't go to the gynecologist until she was 7 months pregnant, and that was the first time she had ever been to one. So can you imagine hearing for the first time that your daughter is trying to pin the whole thing on you, making up that you molested them? You killing your child? Absolutely. I mean,
the whole
how?
thing.
Why? But then lying that your father is molesting?
Okay, hang on a minute. We're going to go past that a little bit because we remember that part. Okay, here we go.
Remember there was a time when like Zanny, I'm gonna take a Zanny tonight. Yes, I just wanna let loose and take a Zanny. So it makes sense, right? So George believes that Casey was giving her Xanax and then calling the Xanax like Zanny the nanny because it would help her sleep and, babysit while Casey went out and partied, hung out with her boyfriend and gave her the freedom to do what she wanted. He thinks that he gave her too much Xanax and she just didn't wake up. George is the only one around here with some goddamn common sense. Zanny, I'm gonna take a Xanax.
Yeah, she's pretty funny. I like her too. Hang on a second, y'all. We need to get down to the end of this so we can get on our next case because this case, it's
2011.
Look how pretty
That's
her eyes
it.
are.
That's the story. If you remember watching this on TV, like I was, we were livid. Unbelievable. It still is. The jurors in that case, they were scared because they were receiving death threats of their own. They kept the jurors' names quiet for X amount of time, but after that, it was just like, here are their names, everyone. Ooh, it wasn't good. I feel like they just should have left the jurors alone and gone after like Casey directly, but I guess that's just me. So after the trial, it came out that Casey had filed for bankruptcy twice and was unable to pay her lawyer, Jose Baez. So what happens when you don't have money to pay your lawyer? Well, she paid him in sexual favors. Someone even reported seeing Casey completely naked in his office, and she accidentally like walked in on it, and they were like, oh shit. It's not illegal to have sex with your lawyer, okay? You can and you.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do y'all believe that she had sex with her lawyer? I've always wondered about that too. I mean, didn't she?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%.
Okay, yeah, 100% we do believe that, right? But he's a piece of shit, isn't he? I do believe that he's a piece of crap if he could. Oh my God. All right. Now we know that lawyers just do their job. We know that everybody deserves a fair trial. Everybody deserves a lawyer. They put on their defense, and if their defense is good enough, then you walk away. And apparently his defense was good enough and she walked away. So most horrific case and one of the most hated moms in America. So we're going to get off of that one. Hang on a minute.
You can, but it's certainly.
Now, the next case that we're going to talk about over here, hang on a second, guys, let me get back over here, so that was, okay, the reason why this case is notable, and it will always be notable, is because this case generated intense public debate because many observers believe the evidence suggested criminal responsibility, while the jury concluded that the prosecutors had not proven murder beyond a reasonable doubt. The verdict prompted a widespread discussion about forensic evidence, media influence on criminal trials, and the distinction between public opinion and the legal standard required for convictions. Now, later on in public life, after the trial, Anthony largely stayed out of the public view for several years. She later participated in the 2022 Peacock documentary, Casey Anthony, Where the Truth Lies, where she presented her account of the events and renewed accusations against her father, allegations he has denied. In 2025, she re-entered the public discussion through social media, describing herself as a legal advocate and a researcher. But bullshit. Now, the next one of these cases we're going to talk about is good old Alex Murdaugh. Let's talk about Alex Murdaugh. Now, his real name, his full name is Richard Alexander Murdaugh. Now, we know he's a former South Carolina lawyer and a powerful legal family that dominated parts of the state's low country legal system for generations. Now, he became nationally known after being convicted in 2023 of murdering his wife and younger son after admitting to extensive financial crimes that unraveled the family's long-standing influence. Okay, now let's talk about his father and some of the other things in his background. Alex Murdaugh, he was born in 1968, and the Murdaughs were a very prominent family, and they had always been prosecutors in South Carolina and the 14th Judicial Circuit for nearly 9 decades, 90 years of law in that one family. And he worked at the family's well-known personal injury law firm and was regarded as a successful attorney before the scandal emerged. Now, we know a lot about Alex Murdaugh and what's going on, and I cannot believe that he is getting a new trial. And what's upsetting about that is who believes that the district clerk, who believes that her saying anything at all or writing a book actually interfered with that case? What do you think, Sprinkle? And what do you think, Cinderella? Was the case interfered with?
It's hard to say positively, but it's very quite possibly. And the fact that it's quite possibly that creates that opening to give him a new trial.
Right? Okay. Let me see something about this. Hang on a second, guys. Let me pull this up right over here. Hang on just a second. We're going to look at something in just a minute. Here we go. I don't know that anything that she said really made a difference in that trial. Becky Hill, I don't know if anything she said made a difference or not, because remember, they asked some of the jurors. And back to jurors, I don't think the jurors' names should ever be released. Anytime you go for jury duty, you're doing a civic duty. That does not give them the right to release your name for all the public to come in and harass you because you didn't get the sentence that they thought they deserved, or they get an acquittal because you voted that way. Yeah, making sauerkraut. Oh, that's okay. She's making sauerkraut. I'm sorry, I couldn't see Cinderella. It's okay. Ooh, I love sauerkraut. I haven't had it in a long time, but I do love sauerkraut. Yum, yum. Send me some, Cinderella. I want some. But I don't think that Becky Hill necessarily is the reason why it was overturned. I just think that they went too far with blaming it on her, and I think that they felt like if they didn't overturn it, then they would have a problem somewhere down the road. And it'd be better overturn it now and let's have another trial, instead of not overturning it and just letting it keep going. Now, it was a unanimous 5-0 ruling. Now, again, we talked about this a while ago. A unanimous ruling in a Supreme Court is odd. It doesn't always happen. It doesn't happen very often at all. They are ordering a brand new trial. The state's highest court ruled that Hill had improperly communicated with the jurors and placed her fingers on the scales of justice, violating Murdaugh's constitutional right to a fair trial. She is guilty of allowing other people to come into and see the evidence, etc. She should have never been allowed to do that. The book scandal was huge. Let's see. And she writes the book Behind the Doors of Justice, and that was the Murdaugh murders. She was exposed for using her public office to heavily promote this book for personal financial gain and plagiarizing portions of it. In December, she was convicted for the state charges, including perjury, obstruction of justice, and misconduct in office. She admitted to misusing county funds and illegally giving select media outlets access to graphic crime scene photographs. She was sentenced to 3 years of probation in order to pay restitution. That's all. That's all she gets for a trial that's going to cost millions of dollars in the long run. Following the reversal of his murder conviction, Alex Murdaugh filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Hill seeking $600,000 in damages to cover his defense costs. In June of 2026, Hill's legal defense team filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, claiming she is protected by quasi-judicial immunity. Woohoo! All right. So the Murdaugh situation is going to be interesting, and I want to see what happens I can't wait for the new trial to happen. I can't wait to see the new trial of Letitia Stouch and of the Murdaugh case, and Adam Montgomery. Now, Adam Montgomery's case is also quite sickening of what happened there. But let's move on to the next case that we want to talk about, and this is Mapp versus Ohio. Now, this is kind of an old case, and it was decided in 1961. And Mapp versus Ohio was a landmark decision by the Supreme Court of the United States that reshaped the criminal procedures in the United States. Now, this was decided in 1961, and it held evidence obtained through unconstitutional searches and seizures generally cannot be used in state criminal prosecutions, making the exclusionary rule applicable to both federal and state courts. Now, if you go back and you look at the case of O.J. Simpson, when Furman jumped that fence and supposedly found a glove, etc., he didn't have a search warrant for that. Remember all that? That's another big issue. So let me go see if I can find this. Let me go over here and we'll see. I don't know if there's anything about Mapp versus Ohio, but we'll try to see if there is. And come on back up. Okay, come on. Here we go. Let me try to get this over here. Backspace. Okay, let's see. M-A. Okay, let's see if anybody has done anything. Oh, here we go. Oh, look, 8 years ago, Mr. B actually talked about this. And also, the Federalist Society talked about it. Let's see, who do we want? Untold History. Let's look at Untold History. We're going to play theirs. Hang on a second, guys. And this is from 2 years ago. Let me share my screen. Let me share our screen. Okay, so this is from Credit to Untold History. Okay, did I spell it right? Oh, hang on. Let's fix this. All right, now, here we go. Here we go. All right, let me share the screen. Okay, I did share the screen already, right? Okay, here we go. So let me make this bigger again, and this is going to be full credit to Untold History, and thank you for sharing. Here we go. All right, past that to go where they're actually talking.
Oh. And unlawful search discovered illegal pornography in her.
What is it doing?
Unlawful search discovered illegal pornography in her basement.
All right, hang on a second.
Mapp was convicted of.
Let me make this smaller so I can fix it. Hang on, guys. So sorry. It's acting funky because I need to come back over here and back it up. All right, there. All right, here we go.
To enter and search her property without written permission from a court of law called a warrant. But what happens when they don't have a warrant and enter anyway? That was the question posed by Dolly Mapp, who took her right to privacy all the way to the Supreme Court. The story of Mapp versus Ohio really began over 200 years ago, when British soldiers could search colonial homes whenever they wanted. But after the United States won its independence, the founders banned this practice with the Constitution's Fourth Amendment, which made unreasonable search of a person or their property illegal without official permission. Fast forward to 1957, after a bombing in Cleveland, police believed that the suspect might be hiding in Dolly Mapp's home.
Okay, remember in Letitia Stouch's trial, she wanted, when they took her phone, and she says they didn't really have a warrant, they didn't have the right to go through her phone, and she tried to get that evidence removed, not so they wouldn't be allowed to show it in court. Yeah, I wonder if she's going to try it again, and I do wonder if she's going to be successful this time. Because if you're being interrogated, and they say, "Hey, do you mind if I see your phone?" and they start trying to download and go through things, they need to have the warrant first. And I know the reason why in some cases they don't get the warrant first is because they're afraid the person's going to delete or damage the phone where they can't get the information. And there have been cases where they have won their fight because they didn't have a warrant and then started getting the information first because they knew that the person would absolutely hide, delete, destroy. Okay, here we go.
23rd, they entered her house without a warrant, handcuffed Mapp, and after an extensive and unlawful search, discovered illegal pornography in her basement. Mapp was convicted of possessing obscene materials and sentenced to up to 7 years in prison. Convinced she had been the victim of an unlawful search, Mapp appealed her case to the Supreme Court of Ohio. But when that proved unsuccessful, she took the fight to the highest court in the land. The case hinged on whether evidence obtained illegally could be admissible in state courts. A previous case, Weeks versus United States, had already set a precedent with the exclusionary rule, which meant evidence obtained illegally could not be used in federal court. On June 19, 1961, the Supreme Court ruled that the law should be the same for state courts, meaning Mapp's conviction was overturned. Mapp v. Ohio set an important legal precedent by establishing that all evidence obtained in searches and seizures that violate the Fourth Amendment are unconstitutional and therefore inadmissible in court. When it comes to warrants, do you think society or the rights of individuals are more important?
That is a good question. when it comes to warrants, do you think, what do y'all believe? Is it society or the rights of the individuals? What's the most important to you guys? Sprinkle and Cinderella. Ooh, I want some sauerkraut now that you
I
talked
think
about
you
it.
have to go with the rights of people. You have to, because if you don't, then you can't follow the legal system correctly.
Okay, and Cinderella can tell us what she thinks. I think that you do have a right. But let me ask you this: if you think that if you think that somebody's harboring things to make bombs with, and they've made threats about this, don't you think that that is a problem for society, not the person's rights, but the society or the better? Yeah, she agrees. She agrees with you 100%. Thank you, Cinderella. So at that point, is it society or is it the rights of the individual? Because if I know somebody has making bombs in their garage and I know that they threatened to blow up the post office or whatever, I'm going to go say something because it affects everybody, not just the person making the bombs. So that's kind of a controversial situation. I think it's very controversial, but I can see that the rights of the individuals are protected by the Constitution, right? So anyway, that's a little story. Let's finish watching this real quick. That's just a little bit of something that did change the laws in America. Okay, that is the end of that. All right, now let's go over to the next case we're going to talk about. There's a few of these, and let's talk about right here. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled that the exclusionary rule previously applied only to federal prosecutions and also applied to the states through due process clause on the 14th Amendment of the United States. This meant the evidence gathered in violation of the 4th Amendment would generally be inadmissible in state and criminal trials, creating a stronger incentive for law enforcement to comply with the constitutional search requirements. Yes, the lasting significance of this case is the decision became one of the foundational rulings governing modern criminal procedures in the United States. It reinforced the judicial oversight of police conduct and expanded constitutional protections for individuals and influenced countless later cases involving searches, warrants, and the admissibility of evidence. Although later Supreme Court decisions created several exceptions to the exclusionary rule, Matt v. Ohio remains a cornerstone to the Fourth Amendment jurisdiction. So that is the cases that I wanted to talk about today. Let me turn this off over here. Hang on. I'm going to turn this off and we're going to go over to this other. Close that window. Come on, close the window. There we go. So, let's see. There's also, do y'all remember the case about United States versus Nixon? Do y'all remember that one?
No.
Let me see if there's something on YouTube about that one because that's hang on a minute. Let's see if there's anything over here. Hang on. All right. Versus Nixon. Let's see if somebody's brought anything to that about that. Is President Nixon above the law? That's what this is about. So we're going to go to 4 years ago.
This video is.
And this is going to be from Mr. Beat again. So hang on a second. So let's give credit to Mr. Beat. I think this is the last one we're going to do today. Okay. And so that is the question I'm going to ask. Should presidents be above the law? My answer is hell no. They should not be above the law. They are no different than any of the rest of us, and they do break the law, and they should be held accountable. That's what I think. What do y'all think? Sprinkle and Cinderella.
I agree with you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I wonder what, Cinderella, you think that any president should be above the law, or should they be held to the same standards that we're held to? But now we'll say this while she answers. I will say this. We have seen that not be the case in so many cases. They have actually should have been charged, were charged, and then the case is dismissed by a higher court before it even went to trial. We've seen that with a bunch of different presidents. They know, but they don't get treated the same as we do because they are a president or a part of Senate or whatever their job is for the United States of America. Look how many of okay, we'll talk about that another day. So this is from Mr. B. Let's give him full credit and use under fair use, and let's let him talk for a minute. Let me get this going, and here we go.
5 men break into the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate office building. They try to set up a wiretap and photograph confidential Democratic Party documents. However, the police caught them in the act and arrested them. Little did most know, these men were connected with the Committee for the Re-election of the President, or CRP, or CREEP, the organization directly tied to President Richard Nixon in order to help him get re-elected. Flash forward to May 1973, and thanks to multiple ongoing investigations, now more and more Americans Americans are thinking the Nixon administration was directly linked to the Watergate break-in. The U.S. Senate Watergate Committee began public hearings, and the Nixon administration appointed Archibald Cox to lead a separate, independent investigation. Flash forward again to July 1973, and Americans found out that there is a new system in the White House that automatically records everything in the Oval Office and cabinet room. In other words, if Nixon was in on the Watergate.
Okay, so now that we've heard it as Watergate instead of the United States versus Nixon, yeah, they need to be to a higher standard and be accountable. Yes, Cinderella, I agree with that. They should be held to a higher standard than we are because of their role in government and because they represent the United States of America. We, the people, elected these people, and they should be held to the same standard or higher. Thank you, Cinderella. I agree with that. Let's keep. But when you say, if I would have said, "Hey, y'all remember Watergate?" You said, "Oh, hell yeah, I remember that." You know, there you go.
Break-in, or even if he just knew about it and was trying to cover it up, there could be evidence of it in the recordings. Cox, as well as the Senate, immediately subpoenaed the White House recordings, or required that they be submitted to court as evidence. However, Nixon refused to release them, citing his, quote, executive privilege as the president. He even ordered Cox to drop his subpoena, and after Cox refused, Nixon had him fired. Not a good look there, Nixon. But the investigations only picked up in what eventually became known as the Watergate scandal. A total of 69 people were indicted and 48 people convicted for either participating in a...
Think about this. Who was not convicted? Who was not convicted out of the whole scandal? Yeah. Who was it? Yeah, we know. Here we go.
Leading in or covering up information about the Watergate break-in. Many of these folks were top Nixon administration officials. By early 1974, it seemed pretty clear that President Nixon had at least known about the Watergate break-in and tried to cover it up. However, there was little solid evidence, and Nixon had still refused to give up the recordings. On March 1st, 1974, a grand jury, or special jury selected to see if an accusation was valid or not, indicted 7 former aides of Nixon, who later simply became known as the Watergate 7. Nixon could feel the walls closing in on him. In April, the dude who took Cox's place to investigate the Watergate break-in, Leon Jaworski, had another subpoena, but this one just ordered Nixon to release certain tapes and papers. Well, Nixon could feel the heat, but still didn't want to release the recordings. Instead, he turned over edited transcripts of some of the conversations. After Nixon's lawyer, James St. Clair, asked Judge John Sirica of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia to reverse the subpoena, Judge Sirica laughed. Well, I don't know if he laughed, but he said, quote, "The president wants me to argue that he is as powerful a monarch as Louis XIV, only 4 years at a time, and is not subject to the processes of any court in the land except the court of impeachment." Oh, snap.
All right, now, good God. Comparing himself to Louis XIV. What? That was kind of crazy, don't you think? So the path to non-prosecution is what we're going to talk about when we talk about Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal. Special prosecutors and federal grand juries had prepared a draft presentment in February of 1974, outlining plans to charge Nixon with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and bribery. This culminated into the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in the United States versus Nixon, which forced him to hand over audio recordings, proving that he directly directed the FBI's cover-up. So the sitting president directed a cover-up. So rather than face formal White House impeachment, he just resigned. He became the first U.S. president to resign. But on September the 8th of 1974, President Ford granted Nixon a full, free, and absolute pardon. This preempted any potential criminal charges from ever being filed or pursued in court. That's like he got an exoneration, even though we know he was guilty. Was that fair? No, it was absolutely not fair. So let's go over here. Hang on a second. I'm going to play this for a second, and then we're going to go talk about something else that I found on Reddit that I thought was pretty interesting.
Up there, Judge. So, Sirica denied the motion and ordered Nixon to turn over the tapes by May 31st. In response, Nixon and Jaworski appealed directly to the Supreme Court, who heard oral arguments on July 8th. Justice William Rehnquist, who had close connections with several of the Watergate conspirators, decided to recuse himself from the case, or excuse himself since he might be too biased. Again, Nixon argued he he had executive privilege, which apparently I forgot to define earlier in this video. Executive privilege just means that a president can withhold information from the public if it's in the public's best interest. Whatever that means, am I right? Anyway, Nixon said executive privilege gave him the power to withhold the tapes. He also argued that the whole matter shouldn't even be dealt with in the courts since it was a dispute within the executive branch. Besides, even if the judicial branch was to chime in, it should respect the need for executive confidentiality.
Let me ask you this. Should we just claim that we have that kind of privilege? Should we have an executive privilege not to have to tell something when we know what's going on or we directed it ourselves? I mean, it's like he decided that he was the judge, jury, and everything, right? I mean, I've always thought that this Watergate scandal was so incredibly strange. Now, Nixon chose to resign after being apprised that he was inevitably going to be impeached by the House and almost certainly convicted and removed in the Senate. It wasn't a question of allowing him to resign, but rather him doing so to avoid that fate. You can't force a person to remain in the presidency. If they want to leave, they can resign. Now, Gerald Ford subsequently pardoned him, which meant that he couldn't be charged with crimes that he may have committed in office. The pardon was very controversial at the time and basically ended Ford's honeymoon period in office. Now, while there's been some counterfactual history and speculative is the biggest impact on American history, are the presidents that were not set that could have come into play in the past couple of years. First, had impeachment and conviction in Congress occurred after Nixon resigned, it would have laid a different groundwork for impeachment and conviction of Donald Trump after the January 6th situation. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump was part of it or not part of it. I'm not going to make any decisions about January the 6th. We're actually talking about Nixon and the Watergate. Okay. So at that time, a number of the senators took positions that someone who had left that office couldn't be impeached and convicted. Second, in similarity, had Nixon actually been prosecuted for his crimes, the Supreme Court at that time probably would have just permitted the convictions to stand, even though Nixon argued that his actions were core to the presidency and the concept of unitary presidency wasn't even a gleam in anyone's eyes in that juncture. It would have made it much more difficult for the current Supreme Court to rule that a president may not be prosecuted for acts within their core powers as they did in Trump versus the United States. It's also arguable that the pardon of Nixon and the angry sense that had gotten away with something and his actions also drove some of the reforms in the mid-1970s that were intended to prevent reoccurrence of Nixon's abuses of power. Those might not have happened if people thought, well, Nixon got Nixon got his just desserts and the system worked. It's very speculative, however. That's just one thing a person said in Reddit. Now, another person comes back and says, one quick correction. The unitary presidents as a phrase may not have been created, but there are nearly contemporaneous legal opinions that advocate for a very similar theory inherent to executive authority. And the AOLC, Office of Legal Counsel, and the executive's legal body, which is responsible for opinion on issues such as constitutional authority and applications of statutes, the application of criminal proceedings to presidents, etc. Now, opinion from 1980 discussing the War Powers Resolution lays out a theory of the commander-in-chief's power that, though not absolute, and that presents the executive commanders-in-chief's power effectively eclipsing Congress's war powers in the short term, with Congress powers growing in the longer and conflict continues until an approval is a constitutional requirement for the continued executive actions. Then another thing happens in 1984. In 1984, another opinion on the same subject that already was rather aggressive, if more reasonable than would now live in, position was shifted wildly in favor of the executive. The OLC opinion determined that a duly passed statute was unable to prevent the president from exercising contemporaneous control over the military, meaning any part of the war powers or resolutions would limit his executive power. Anyway, let's go down to B. There he goes. Let's see. To B, there was going down. Oh no, what's it doing? Hang on a second, guys. Oh, did I just leave? Okay. All right. Anyway, so they started having all these discussions about it. And my phone just freaking died, so I can't finish reading that. But anyway, there's been all kinds of controversy about that. And Sadly, nothing really changed because still every other president who may have been impeached or anything they had against them, they claimed the same thing, right? But let's finish watching this real quick. And then we're going to be
So the main
finishing
thing
up.
the court first had to figure out was whether or not they had the authority to determine if a president was okay to use executive privilege in certain circumstances. And they determined that they did. On July 24th, 1974, the court announced they had sided against Nixon. It was unanimous. The court said that a claim of executive privilege by the president in this case was unconstitutional. Therefore, Nixon had to deliver the subpoenaed recordings ASAP. While the court acknowledged that executive privilege did exist, it was a legit thing in certain areas of military or diplomatic affairs. The court could also step in if they thought the executive privilege violated the, quote, fundamental demands of due process of law and the fair administration of justice. In other words, if executive privilege was preventing the courts from doing their jobs, then it could be overridden. United States.
You know what? I think that's exactly what should have happened, because you cannot let them have absolute power like that. If you let one person have absolute power where they're above the law and nobody can touch them, at that point, what do you got? You might as well live in Russia, because then you have a dictator, you don't have a president. They have to follow laws just like the rest of us. Here we go.
States v. Nixon was a landmark case that solidified the idea that no one, not even the president, is above the law. It was the first case in which the Supreme Court ruled that executive privilege exists, but it said that it is a qualified privilege as opposed to an absolute one. In the case with Nixon's secret recordings, it was in the public interest to have them released. And in the end, most people just came to realize that Nixon wanted them secret not to protect the country, but only to protect himself. In fact, just 16 days after the decision, Nixon became the first and only president in American history to resign.
Now think about that. He knew once they were released and that's with everybody. Anybody who's trying to hide something and they don't want to release it, there's a reason why. Well, this even goes back to, okay, I'm going to say it. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say this. Remember, not too long ago, the people over at HTC, they didn't want things released. They didn't want people talking. They did the 9-hour live, blah, blah, blah. And that was because they also were hiding things that they said about other people. Because in this same case, he's hiding things that he didn't want the Americans to know that made him guilty of something. Guilty people always hide whatever they can. Just remember that. Anyway, here we go. I think that's just the end of that. So,
I'll see you for the next Supreme Court case, jury. This video is sponsored in part by Blinkist, and they...
There you go. So that is what I want to talk about today. I know that to some people, oh, well, whatever, ridiculous, what? But you know what? It's kind of, these things are pretty important to us because it's what makes us be free in the world. We have rights. We can use those rights to protect ourselves, to protect our family, to protect our property. And that's a beautiful thing because not every country in the world do people have rights. Okay. And so anyway, that's why I wanted to talk about a little bit about that today. I just wanted to kind of touch on a little, I guess have a little lesson, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it, but let me tell you what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Rachel doesn't know this yet because I haven't talked to her about it. But anyway, tomorrow we're going to talk about, where's my little date here? Let's see. The screwdriver. We're going to talk about the screwdriver murders. Now, this was the screwdriver murders happened in Texas, and it was a Texas capital charge. There was a death penalty involved. It's the screwdriver murder. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. I'm probably going to change the time because I forgot tomorrow's Saturday when I decided to put that out there. Oh, wait a minute. You know what else? There was something else I was going to do. Okay. Now, also tonight about 10:30, I'm going to try to come back on, and we're going to talk about something that is new that I don't think people ever. If you're a creator, you might want to pay attention to this. Because I always get these little emails about YouTube community. It's called YouTube community something, YouTube community posts. Well, that's where they announce all these new little features and things that you can use. I used to not pay attention to that. Well, then I started paying attention. I was like, oh my gosh, there's all kinds of things that we can use through YouTube that people don't even use. They don't even know it's there. So I thought we'd come back tonight about 10:30 and talk about that. It's mainly for creators or anybody who wants to be a creator or somebody who is a mod to a creator to learn a little bit about that. But anyway, with that, we've been on for 2 hours. So we're going to say goodbye. We'll see you later. Thank you for joining us. If you get a chance, if you're coming in for replay, which we love replay crew, that's fine. Just hit that like button. Give us a thumbs up, please, so we can get this into the algorithm. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. Let me just give you a little hint. They're going to do away with the like button. It's not going to be the little like button anymore. They're going to put a heart there. So at that point, if you like something, you just do the little heart, and it's tracked like that instead of the like button. I think that's better. I'm excited for that change to happen for YouTube and the creators. Anyway, today is a very, Cinderella. Today is a very important housing bill today. Senate won't pass this voting bill, so he threw a temper tantrum and wouldn't sign it. Oh no. Okay, let me look at this really fast, Cinderella. I didn't pay attention. Let me see what's going on with that. Let's talk about that for just a second, and then we'll say goodbye. All right. Okay, this housing bill. Let's see what's going on. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you so much, because I have not paid attention to that. Okay, what's going on over here? All right. Why can't America have a housing bill? Well, here's the reason. Let me talk about this for a second. Okay, Congress recently did something correctly. It passed a big bipartisan bill to address one of the voters' biggest bipartisan concerns, housing affordability. Everything was done the right way. The House, the Senate, and the committees of the jurisdiction each passed their own versions, cleaned up the draft product in concert with each other, and produced a final version that will, while it won't fix the housing shortage, on its own, it takes steps towards making. I don't want to have to get a. Ooh, no, I don't want to get a. Let's find something on YouTube about it. Hang on a minute, y'all. This is important. Housing bill. Let's see, because I know there's going to be a news story. Okay, here we go. All right, let's see. One day ago. Okay, let's look at this one right here. This is going to be from PBS NewsHour for just a second. Hang on. Let's give full credit to PBS NewsHour. Thank you, Cinderella. That is important. Yes. Okay. All right. Let me tell you something. My husband is a banker, and it is ridiculous what is going on out there. And oh God, I got to spell it right. Hang on. With interest rates, right? There is no reason for a mortgage to be 5 or 6%. No reason at all. But it's based on greed, actually. All right, did I spell that right? Thank you, guys. Hang on just a second. I don't mean to be so. Oops. Hour. Okay. Get my little glasses. That's what I need to go do is get my little glasses. Okay, so PBS NewsHour is going to bring us this story. But there is absolutely no reason for the feds to keep the rates that high. Guess what you're doing? When the rates are that high, people are not spending money because they can't afford to spend money. When you have families that can't even afford, you got both parents working and they still can't afford to feed their family, something is very wrong with that picture. So let's watch this really fast, guys. Oh, I gotta share the screen. Hang on.
Restrictions for the construction of manufactured homes, increase access to small dollar mortgages, and moving forward, bar large institutional investors like private equity firms from owning more than 350 single-family homes. To break down the potential impact, we're joined now by Sean Donovan. He served as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Barack Obama. He's currently the President and CEO of Enterprise Community Partners. That's a housing nonprofit. Secretary Donovan, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So it's clear.
Okay, this is very, very important. Thank you, Cinderella, for bringing this up. It is very, very important. You know, most people cannot even afford to buy a house. Okay, my house is on the market, and it should have sold. But the reason why it hasn't sold is because people cannot afford to get a mortgage and pay the interest rates on houses in this market. Because, you know, some houses don't qualify for FHA, VA, or those kind of mortgages that you only put 3% down. They have limits on the amount the house can be. So that makes some houses not be able to be sold to those people. Even though they could afford them that way, the interest rates are too high. And so a house like this, you have to have a conventional mortgage on. A conventional mortgage means you got to put 20% down. Well, 20% down in some houses is the cost of one small house. I mean, the housing market is outrageous. You've got people not moving at all. You've got families living in 2 or 3 families living in one home because they can't even afford to pay rent. It's everything is completely outrageous and ridiculous. Here we go. Well, I could get on a soapbox, but I'm not going to.
Reform is needed when it comes to housing. When you look at the numbers, home prices are up 54% since 2020. The median cost of a mortgage has nearly doubled. By some estimates, we have a housing shortage of nearly 7 million units. You called this bill the most important, most comprehensive housing bill of this century. Why? What would it change?
Well, we'd need the entire news hour to get through all of the provisions. There are literally dozens of them in this bill, but you got it exactly right. The core of this bill is to say, for decades now, we have not been building enough housing in this country. That is at the center of what is the greatest housing affordability crisis we've ever recorded in the US. And that is really what this does. It unleashes local communities and the private sector to do more to build housing. And it gets regulations and other steps.
Now, I will say one thing. I really do believe there should be regulations when it comes to home building, and I'll tell you why. You cannot have people living in homes that are not energy efficient, that are not going to withstand the weather and those kind of things. You really do need some control over home building and the products used in the home building. But here we go.
Out of the way to help do that.
One of the provisions that got a lot of attention was this ban on institutional investors buying single family homes. How significant is that? Would that really move the needle?
Well, I think what's really important here about the provision is that as it was originally drafted, it actually would have had unintended consequences. It might have stood in the way in some ways of building more affordable housing. And so through good bipartisan negotiations, those unintended consequences were fixed. But I think stepping back, there is no single silver bullet in this bill. It is really the sum total of the pieces that make it the most comprehensive legislation that we've seen. And I do think those are provisions that are a wide range, but will really take local implementation to have an impact on families' lives in this country.
So let's talk about that implementation, because the reforms, as you mentioned, range from environmental reviews to zoning restrictions, single-stair buildings. They seem very specific and niche, taken one by one, but the timing has to be an issue, right? It's going to take years, if not decades, for some of these new rules have a real impact on the housing market. So
okay, we have to stop so often for fair use, but let me just say this. Y'all all know I'm 65. I'll be 66 on my birthday. Everybody knows my age. A lot of these things that they're working on, I will probably not even be here by the time it actually gets implemented, right? Because it takes them so long to fight about this and bring that. And, sometimes I look at these things and I'm going, okay, but y'all take way too long to institute it. You can vote on it all you want to, but the real consumer does not see a change for years and years. So it's like, it's too slow. It's just too slow. Here we go.
Can the bill have enough of a change fast enough for it to make a difference in Americans' lives?
Look, I think you've put your finger on a really important point here. We didn't get into this crisis overnight. And to solve the housing supply challenge, we're not going to get out of it overnight. And my organization, Enterprise Community Partners, was central to helping to shape some of the provisions. But we're now gearing up. In some ways, we've been saying here, Congress did its job. Now it's time for all the rest of us to do our jobs. And it really is going to take mayors and governors and local councils, state legislatures to get onto this. The good news is that they know this is the number one economic issue for most American families.
It sure is. It sure is. Okay, I can't watch this whole thing. It's already 4:30, but you know what? Here's what I'm going to suggest. I want anybody that watches this on replay, whatever, go out and find out the information on this, because it is very important to all of us. As it is now, my child who's in college right now will not be able to ever afford a home of his own, even though he's going to go to medical school, even at that, because he will have loans for his medical school, because that's outrageous. And then, it's like our future cannot ever get ahead. They will always do less than their parents did. It should not be that way. It should be that your children do better than you do. right? It's supposed to be, they should build a better life than you did. And it's just not that way right now. Everything is outrageous, ridiculous, expensive, groceries, all of it. And he's right. We didn't get into this overnight, and we're not going to get to this. We're not going to get out of it overnight. The worst thing that ever happened to this country, I'm going to say it, was treating the pandemic the way they treated it. The pandemic should have not shut down this country. The bird flu many years ago did not shut down this country, did it? That was the worst mistake they ever made. I think that people were misled about that. Yes, people died. Yes, they did. But they were the elderly and the sick. And I'm not saying they didn't deserve to live. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is the way it was handled stopped growth, put us in the situation that we're in right now. And I don't know how we're ever going to get out of it. Okay, that's what I'm going to say about that. Cinderella, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, it's so important. It's so important for change to be made now. And here's the thing: people always say the president. It has nothing to do with the president, really. Okay, the president is really not. He's just there, but everybody has to work together. It's really not just him. I mean, everybody has to work together. So it doesn't matter if it's Democrat, Republican, or Independent. Everybody has to work together to make this happen and to make sure that our children's future is secured. Let's look at, okay, I'm going to get on my tangent for just about 5 minutes here, and then we'll get off here. Let's look at the Social Security situation. Social Security was always meant for you to pay into because you worked. So you paid the tax money into that so that you would have a retirement by the time you got ready to retire. As it's going now, people who are working right now will not have funds in that Social Security fund to retire with. It is being misused and given away to people who never paid a damn dime into it. That pisses me off. And that could be a whole nother show about why I get upset about all the things afforded to the people who run across that border and don't do it the right way. If you want to come to this country, apply, do it the right way, do it legally, because you should not be a burden on the rest of us. You should not be taking my husband's future Social Security away from him that he worked for. That should never happen, but that's exactly what's going on. Go do your homework, go out there and look at some of these things that people don't even think about, but it's actually happening. 100%. Go look it up, guys. Anyway, I'm going to say goodbye. I got to go. It's 4:37. We've been on here for 2 hours and 21 minutes. I got some other things to do before my honey gets home. It is Friday night, and we do day night on Friday night. So anyway, thank you for coming in today. Please hit that thumbs up on your way in or your way out. So with that, can you take us out, Sprinkle?
All right. Don't forget to hug your babies.
That's right. And why do we always say, this is the reason why Sprinkle and I always say this. Life is short and our time with them is even shorter. We never know when we might get up one day and our child might not be with us anymore. And the one thing you don't want to have is regret because you didn't reach out to them enough to say, hey, buddy, I love you. Or, hey, your daughter, son, daughter, whichever it is. Hey, I'm so glad to have your, hey, baby. That kind of thing. Make it a point. Go see your children. That's all I got to say. We'll see you later. Have a good evening. Thanks a bunch. Bye, guys. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.